Hello, good evening. Welcome to another slightly different episode of Lorebeards. If you can hear us out there, do please drop a comment over on Twitch and YouTube so that I know that you can hear us clearly. Why don't you say a quick hello on your side as well? Why have I got Alexander saying 40k hell yeah on? Let's just get rid of that. There we go. So say hello on your side, Ross, just to make sure everyone can hear you too.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ross Watson. Nice to meet you.
And as you all know, of course, I'm Andy Law. So, for those of you expecting Sotek, you may notice that he's got a little bit older. He's got a hat on. He's not looking the same as normal. Sotek is off doing Sotek things, wandering the world, appeasing the gods or whatever it is that Sotek does. Meaning that, of course, he's not available for us to chat this Wednesday. So, we had a little bit of a chin wag and we decided to come up with something a bit different. So what is a bit different? The bit different is, let me all introduce you to the extraordinarily awesome Ross Watson. Now, you might go, who the fuck is Ross Watson? And there we go, I'm ruining the monetization because I swore within the first 5 minutes, but I'm Scottish. It's what happens. Who the fuck is Ross Watson? Ross Watson is, drum roll, I shall pass over to the good Mr. Ross Watson.
Well, thank you very much. I really cannot beat that kind of build-up, frankly. You should be my showman wherever I go, just kind of like hype the crowd. So, hi everybody, I'm Ross Watson. So why am I here? I've worked on a whole bunch of 40k stuff in the past. If you've played any of the Warhammer 40k role-playing games, there's a really good chance I was involved. I was the lead as a developer for Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, Deathwatch. I did a lot of work on Only War. I've built a few video games as well, if you've ever played Battlefleet Gothic Armada or Regicide. So I've worked on a whole lot of 40k stuff. And actually, some of my work is now video games as well, like the new Rogue Trader game from Alcat is actually built on the role-playing game that I designed. So those are the reasons why I'm here. And I'm so happy to be on the Lorebeards channel because I have been a fan for a long time.
Oh.
And it's cool to be here. Also to talk about something that's kind of in common between the Warhammer 40,000 universe and the Warhammer universe. And why don't you get us going with that, Andy?
Yeah. But before we dive in, because there's a few things I want to say before we dive in. Number one is Ross is awesome. I've spoken with Ross a few times in the past. He's bluntly just awesome. There is no way we couldn't have him on Lorebeards at some point. We've been discussing it, Sotek and I, for some time, largely because whenever various conversations come up regarding what I've done for Warhammer Fantasy down through the last couple of decades or so, basically Ross has done exactly the same over on the roleplay side. And as we've said multiple times in the past, the roleplay game is where things are often given a great deal of extra context, where things become real. They're not top-tier battle stuff. These are real people trying to engage with real lives. And Ross has done the pretty tough job of trying to bring that epic setting down to a playable ground and has pretty much blown it away repeatedly in multiple books. So consider him to be like the 40k version of me, if you wish, because that's a nice way to begin. And he has been a very busy man with multiple games down through time, and he is bluntly just the best. So that gives us our quick intro into Ross, for example. As Mark says there, hi Ross. I played a bunch of the FFG RPGs. I've had a lot of fun with them, so thanks.
Thank you, sir. I forgot to mention Wrath and Glory, which is the most recent game. I designed that from the ground up as well. So actually one of my
there's been one more now, Imperium Maledictum.
I had nothing to do with that one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there's somebody in the comments who's actually one of my players in my weekend group. That there he is right there. Yeah, that's Ryan. He's a hell of a painter too. He's won some awards for Horus Heresy for his art, his armies.
Cool.
So.
Lovely. If you are out there and want to share your images with us, drop into the LAWhammer Discord, the LAWhammer Discord channel, and do share some of your miniatures there, Kruger, because I'm always willing to have a look more. If you're currently over on Twitch, so I can't give you the links over on Twitch. Well, I can. I'd have to go find them. But if you pop over to the YouTube version, you will find a link sitting down in the description for access through to our Discord if you'd like to come in there and say hi. That would be Awesome. All right, so what are we discussing today, Ross? It is indeed, as you suggested, something that's sort of a crossover between the Warhammer and the 40K.
That's right. So one of the things that is kind of common across both of these big settings is the idea of a place where reality is immutable, where time and space really don't have a lot to do with each other, and it is kind of a realm of metaphor where things in our world are kind of reflected in a twisted manner. And that in Warhammer 40K, it's called the warp or the immaterium. In the Warhammer universe, I believe you call it the realm of chaos.
Although there are a bunch of other names as well.
Oh, yeah, so many.
So many. Much more commonly in the rule books, it's the Aether, but we will get on to that. The Aether, the Aether, the Aether, the Aether. I have a bunch of stories regarding the Aether and whether we could even call it the Aether as well, which was definitely a thing. Hey, Dynaman. Hello, Ross says Dynaman. Thanks very much, by the way, for the cheers. And welcome to the Small C Chaos. Out of curiosity, do you think 40K RPG would ever do rules for playing as Tau and their auxiliary species?
So just to be clear, to start with, I'm not employed by Cubicle 7, or I'm not actually like doing that work at the moment. So I don't have anything to do with it. But my opinion is that they definitely should, because Kroot are cool as hell, frankly. We put them in all of the Rogue Trader stuff that we could because they were so neat. And the Tau have been getting more and more developed over time in the lore. So it would be really cool to see them as something that you could have in your game or even embody in your game. Like one of the Fire Warriors would actually be a really great character, for example. So yeah, or flying around in a battle suit. Who wouldn't want to do that? I know I would. I'd be down.
I'm like so behind that. I mean, basically anything that has had focus on 40K could really do with just something to develop it further in the RPG.
Leagues of Votann. Leagues of Votann would be really cool. I would love to see a Leagues of Votann style RPG. That'd be really cool.
That'd be freaking awesome,
wouldn't it?
Yeah. Particularly given just how long it took for them to become a thing anyway, and all the background material has been coming out for that is pretty much obviously brilliant. And Mr. Mike, no, he's not. Sotek is currently wandering around. Sotek is fine, Mr. Mike. Don't you be spreading scurrilous rumor. Absolute nonsense. Hey, Skylar, thanks very much. Ross, while I'm a huge Warhammer fan, I am arguably a bigger fan of Star Wars. Oh, interesting. Wikipedia tells me that you worked on Age of Empire, which is one of my favorite TTRPGs, and I just want to say you rock and thanks.
Thank you very much, Skylar. I do appreciate that. Yes, I was involved with Edge of the Empire, and I could tell some stories about how that game came to be because I was there from the very, very beginning with Fantasy Flight when they got the license for Star Wars RPG in the first place. Edge of the Empire was a lot of fun to work on. If you've ever played a Gand in Edge of the Empire, I'm the reason why Gander in the book, for example. But yeah, Star Wars is super cool. I'm actually running a Star Wars RPG game on every other weekend, which Kruger is one of my players. So
nice. Yeah, I played Age of Empire as well. I had a bit of fun with that. We did ourselves a little Star Wars group. I, of course, being me, did a Star Wars scroll to open up every single one of our sessions.
We do that too. We do it because, of course, you have to. It's required.
Yeah, indeed. We set up 8 episode arcs. So we started off with episode 9. Because Star Wars. So we started with episode 9 and went up to episode 18 and then went all the way back to episode 1 because we kind of couldn't help ourselves. It was a nice homage to, or homage if you prefer, to the original Star Wars and how it was produced and released. And the aim was to then go to episode 19 after, but the campaign kind of petered out at that point. Yeah, good times though. I do love me a bit of Star Wars. Hey, Sean, thanks very much. Is there fishmen in the 40K universe?
Oh, okay. So the long answer is yes, of course there are, because there's millions of worlds and the galaxy is really, really big. Is there like a specific fishman? Okay, so first of all, I point you to the Rakgall, which are an alien race in the Coronis Expanse, part of the Rogue Trader setting. They're actually kind of like shark men, but that's a fish. So I would say that's like the first thing that comes to my mind. And I'm pretty sure there's at least one or two more aquatic races out there. I'd have to do a deeper dive, but that's right off the bat, Ragdoll for sure.
There you go. Fishmen. We often get fishmen questions in Lorebeards because it's just how it goes. Alrighty, let's get started because we're going to get started. This is obviously not this is not a standard episode of Lorebeards. It's our Lorebeards Wednesday where we just sit down and do a chinwag. And our chinwag today is going to be about the Realm of Chaos. So I'm going to do what I always do, which is take you back in time. And this time I'm going all the way back to the early 80s. Because the Realm of Chaos, Games Workshop's version of it, is mentioned in, for the first time, Warhammer 1st Edition. And that is going back a bit. All the way back in the Forces of Fantasy book for Warhammer 1st Edition, we got our first references to the Realm of Chaos and the Realm of Chaos books that were going to be released, which were going to provide all of the extra rules that you needed to get all of the gribbly chaos goodness that you could out of your chaos forces. And it took some time for those behemoth set of books to be released. Indeed, it was 2 books in the end, not just one. And those 2 books went through multiple authors and multiple iterations until they eventually arrived at the Realm of Chaos books that were released during Warhammer 3rd Edition. That's how long they took to come out. And this is where the Realm of Chaos got its first real in-depth examination from Games Workshop's perspective. And the Realm of Chaos, as it's presented there, is pretty much what gets ported over into every edition of both Warhammer and 40k from this point forwards, although it will get expanded significantly in Warhammer, and I would argue somewhat less so in 40k, where additional detail is added, but the core concept that's laid there inside the original Realm of Chaos books is not really touched. Cut a very big, long story short. We'll go into details later as required. The Realm of Chaos is an alternate dimension. It lies beyond the standard mortal realms, if we're discussing it with Warhammer language, where normal people are going through their cause and effect lives. It is a realm born of imagination, dreams, horror, and everything else in between. It is a place where your shadow selves, if we go back to the original language, rather than the later language where they just generally said souls, 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 where your souls reside. And when you die, your soul just drifts off and is, in many respects, left with whatever emotional state you through your life ended with. And that emotional state drifts off and occasionally finds others because they're attracted like magnets to each other. So emotional states that are similar and they all attract together. And if enough attract in one place, they may, just may, form into some form of sentience. But the Realm of Chaos, Warhammer style, gets significant development from this. The Realm of Chaos may carry multiple names, whether it's the Immaterium, whether it's the Aether, whether it is the dark reflection of reality, whether it is the divine realms, which is often how it's pitched in Warhammer, because in Warhammer, we have more than just 4 big chaos gods plus other things. We have entire pantheons, and they all live in the same area as the Realm of Chaos. And as the various editions of Warhammer went on, and we went from Warhammer 3rd Edition, where the Realm of Chaos language is moved, and the Divine Book never came out, meaning that as we hit 4th Edition Warhammer, all they had was the Realm of Chaos for what was going on the God side, and they ran with it hard. And you'll find through the editions of 4 all the way up to 8, the Realm of Chaos is exclusively pretty much chaos, and the 4 great powers and a whole bunch of lesser powers that are other gods that lie within the Realm of Chaos. But the roleplay game went in a different direction, like completely different. And as we hit 2nd edition Warhammer, so we're now talking the 90s, and Black Library's various editions, including the various Liber Chaotica books, they discussed a whole lot more than just chaos. In particular, as we move into the Tome of Salvation and the various books about the gods through 2nd edition, 3rd, and into 4th on the fantasy roleplay side. The gods also reside in the same place as the Realm of Chaos. The great war between the 4 great gods of chaos is happening in the Realm of Chaos, but equally there are divine realms for all of the gods. And not only that, a lot of other spiritual entities as well. Not just the weird unaligned demons and screamers that are making their way through the realms like great shoals of fish in a massive sea, but we end up meeting a whole bunch of independent, unique spirits, lesser gods, great deities of rivers, great deities of swamps, great deities of seas, and all of these reside within the same space, which is why in Warhammer Fantasy, rather than Warhammer 40k, the realm of chaos is pretty much used as a term exclusively for just that section of the realm that is inhabited by the chaos gods. In Warhammer, they often instead use the word aether. The word aether being the reflected other side, where all of the material rules no longer apply, where up isn't up and down isn't down, where time itself doesn't really exist, where a mortal mind can't really grasp what's going on and just makes things up in fevered dreams. And from this realm, all of the gods also can be found. And that's all your elven gods, the gods of the Empire Pantheon. In fact, the gods of the entire Warhammer world are in there. Mork and Gork, doing their Gork and Mork thing, are in the divine realms doing stuff too, which is why the aether is often used. And when you come to, say, for example, priests of Sigmar and how they respond to the realm of chaos and magic, which floods across the Warhammer world from the great gates of chaos at the North and South Pole, they quite cleanly preach that magic as it comes into the world is the influence of the chaos gods. But nevertheless, their god Sigmar went into the same realm and has his divine realm in the same place. They have chosen, in many respects, to basically say the place that is influencing our world is pure chaos. By the way, let's just not think about where our God went and where he did his thing. And there is a reason why this mistake is made in the setting. There's a reason why these issues exist in the setting. It's because the writers of Warhammer, in particular, went with the battle books as their core source down through the various editions, meaning that if you just go with that, the only thing that exists is the realm of chaos. And whenever they say something like, oh, but where's Mor's realm? They don't answer that in the battle game because they don't need to. All we need in the battle game is a bunch of Morian knights who look cool as fuck with lances, charging down, okay, onto some undead or something equivalent. And who cares where Mor's realm is? They don't worry about that at all. But you'll find the battle game sometimes does stray. And throughout the course of, say, for example, the undead books, they're often talking about the realm of the dead, the realm of, the realm of where the gods of Nehekara are. And the more that they went into it, the more that it became clear that the realm of chaos standpoint, as in everything beyond is the realm of chaos, sort of doesn't make sense because the aether is bigger, deeper, and much more complicated in Warhammer, where there are countless gods doing countless things. And the big one, as we now tie it through to what Ross is basically here to say, the aether is deep. Really, really deep. It's not just that it's infinite and it's a realm of dreams and imagination and horrors, and it's where gods come from and spirits, and there's indigenous things there, and there's things that have been created there by consciousness. It also goes deeper than that and connects through to other places. These other places include
well, the connectivity between the two. Let's not get into that, but I think I would like to weigh in here a little bit with some of the origins of the realm of chaos and the warp, which all ties back to a guy named Brian Ansell. So Brian Ansell, Brian Ansell is a pretty interesting figure in the history of Games Workshop. He ended up as the managing director and bought the company from Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson in its early days. So Brian is there from the very early days. Okay. And Brian Ansell happened to be a huge fan. This is well documented, is a big fan of Michael Moorcock and all of the Elric cycle and all of the books that Moorcock wrote, which, in case you're not familiar with Michael Moorcock, Michael Moorcock likes to write about.
I have to just be fair. I am somewhat notorious for bringing up Michael Moorcock.
Well,
Hawk Audley, for example. Moorcock mentioned Skull!
Yeah. So Moorcock is kind of foundational to both Warhammer and 40K in a lot of ways because it filters up through Brian Ansell. And Brian Ansell, who may or may not have had some pharmaceutical interests on the side, he was really interested in bringing in aspects of the Moorcock world building, like law and chaos. So order and chaos. Depends on which series you're talking about for Moorcock, but the concepts of order and chaos are very big in those books. So Ansell was very interested in bringing those things into the early world building for both Warhammer and 40K. There's some really interesting stories about him and Rick Priestley talking about this because in its earliest incarnations, Warhammer 40K was meant to be kind of just a sci-fi game. And Ansell was like, no, we need to have demons and we need to have magic. We need to have a realm of chaos where all this stuff comes from. And so Ansell teams up with this guy called Ian Miller. Ian Miller is an artist who is, again, very foundational. Not quite to the level of, say, John Blanche. But Miller has a particular style. And if you've ever looked at the Realm of Chaos books, you probably know Ian Miller's artwork. It's crazy. It is the ravings of a madman drawn onto the canvas. So Ansell and Miller worked together to kind of build a lot of the visuals and the lore for what chaos is in the world of Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. And other authors and other artists and other creators have just built on that foundation over time. So if you want to talk about the Realm of Chaos, you want to talk about the Warp, you have to talk about Brian Ansell, you have to talk about Ian Miller. And so I feel like we've at least paid our homage to the greats who have paved the way for us coming into the future. But a lot of what you say, Andy, of course, is absolutely correct and really interesting. And I would love to just talk about the Warhammer side of it, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to talk about the 40K side of it. And in 40K, one of the biggest things about what is called the warp in 40K, or the immaterium, the aether is just not a term for 40K. But in 40K, what the biggest thing about the warp is it tends to be a place that is used for travel, like the Imperium specifically, and orcs and a few other races tend to use the warp as a shortcut when they want to travel faster than light. They essentially poke a hole between our world and hell, and they ride on the unfettered tides of hate until they poke another hole and emerge out of the immaterium into wherever they were going. The joke is, the meme is that the movie Event Horizon is just a Tuesday in 40K because
interestingly, just as a small aside, Event Horizon, the writer behind it, he fully intended for it to be a prequel to 40K.
No kidding. Wow,
no kidding.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's obvious in its.
Yeah, he was 100% of the mind that the world of 40K was to come, and this was very much a prequel idea, and I freaking love that. So I also love the movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great movie, but in 40K, so it's a place of travel. But I think I'm going to defer to your expertise on this, but I believe in Warhammer, the Realm of Chaos is where the winds of magic come from. Like, magic is powered from things that are connected to the ether or the Realm of Chaos. In 40K,
I'll very quickly cover this because it was also for a very brief time almost the same in 40K, particularly if you look at Space Hulk and what it did, where in Warhammer all magic comes from the Chaos Gates, both north and south, but largely the south at the northern gate, and where the realm of chaos, or alternatively the aether, hits the material realm, it turns into the winds of magic. The winds of magic are empirical. They are not part of the warp, or they're not part of the aether and what lies beyond. They are a part of the real world. And they seep in across the world in a way that is completely unlike anything that happens in 40K. 40K tends not to have It has warp influence. It has, the influence of the warp, and the warp is it's coming here because the veil between there and here has begun to thin. Where in Warhammer, it becomes something really very different, almost like the gate itself is doing something to those winds. And a couple of sources in Warhammer, for example, it suggests that there's actual demons responsible for each wind, each one being concentrated and created into a particular form. This pops up in a couple of different sources. Where in 40K, there was for a brief moment the idea that this might come, for example, immaterialism was sort of like the purple wind, really quite close. And it sort of popped up in Space Hulk in a couple of places, and then they ditched it, and they went with a very different route for their psychers.
Well, I can tell you this. Okay, so first of all, I can tell you this, that the warp is the source. It is touched. Anyone who uses psychic power touches the warp. The warp is the source of that energy, that power that creates the supernatural effects that are called psychic powers. And it almost you realize that almost exclusively what we know about 40K comes through Imperium sources. So there is a bias. There's a bit of a bias towards what we know, right, about as opposed to what may actually be the truth. So yes, the warp in 40K is the source of all of the supernatural events or powers or abilities. And not unlike Warhammer, there are schools or disciplines, if you will, of psychic abilities that fall into categories that could loosely be categorized like lores. For example, biomancy is a psychic discipline, right? could be life magic. Pyromancy, etc., and there are so many of these different types of, I don't want to use the term lores, but the different types of psychic energies that they are, in many ways, they're just there's too many to even list, frankly. Anyway, the point being is that the warp is the source of these energies, and in 40K also it's said very clearly that to gaze upon the warp unfettered, to see it in its raw form, is death. It will kill a normal man. Just, you're dead. This is famously expressed through the navigators. Navigators are mutants in Warhammer 40K who are needed because they can see the tides of the warp and guide ships through the corridors that the warp creates between two different locations. And a navigator, their third eye, because it can behold the warp, right? To gaze into a navigator's third eye is to see the warp, and then you die. It is very clear that the navigator's third eye is don't look at it because you're looking at the warp.
One of the things I really love as a difference between Warhammer and 40K is in Warhammer, spell users, magic users, those who can fling magic, aren't using the warp.
No,
they're just not. They're doing something very different because they're using the winds of magic. They're using something material. They never connect to the warp ever. If they were to find themselves suddenly in 40K, you might find them weirdly incapable of doing anything because the very magics that they use rely on the winds of magic. So they're never directly connected to chaos in the same way that your average psyker is, and becoming a sanctioned psyker and getting yourself soul stamped or whatever equivalent to try and stop yourself being so endangered from the various demons that are prowling around. It's not the same thing in Warhammer, and that's super cool.
It is not the same thing. It's similar in a lot of ways. Yeah. Also, something that is interesting, and one of the things I love the most about the warp in 40K is that time and space are just kind of different there. They're strange. It is often said that if you begin a journey through the warp, you can end up arriving at your destination far later than you expected, years, decades, even.
Decades, yeah.
And in some rare instances, it has been, let's put it this way, the imperial records on these things are very, very redacted.
Red tape in the Imperium, never.
But any reports or records of people arriving before they left, those things are happen often enough that there's an entire Ordo of the Inquisition called the Ordo Chronos that seeks out all these time-related instances and tries to determine like what actually happened. So I don't know, is that a thing in the Realm of Chaos? Could I go into the Realm of Chaos and emerge from the Realm of Chaos much later than I expect? Like if I spend a year in the Realm of Chaos and I come out 10 years later, is that a thing?
Yes. In Warhammer, it's a very common thing, in fact. The Aether, let's use that term for Warhammer side to make sure that we don't get lost in all of the minutiae between them. The Aether manipulates time with actual magic. One of the winds of magic, Shyish, is strongly related. That's the purple wind to time. And it was also tied into some time manipulation in 40k for a while when their purple version popped up. Again, check that in the old original Space Hulk. There are connections there, the connective tissue, because back then 40k and Warhammer were basically just the same in two different settings. But as each developed and Games Workshop very much decided they wanted them to be unique and didn't want Warhammer to feel like it was just a tiny part of a far bigger whole that was 40k, that it was its own unique thing. They diverged significantly. But yes, there are multiple examples where the Aether comes into the real world and influences it, particularly where spirits are a high component of the local flora and fauna that might be around. Athelloren, for example, where the wood elves are, time there just runs weird, where not only they have places which are dedicated to one season and it just never changes, and the sun may never set, which is a thing. But you also have various stories of knights who've gone in and come out 100 years, 200 years later. It's all fairy tale stuff, but it's well documented. It has happened. And you also, much like if you're a ship moving through the warp, you have examples of people who have come out before they were born. And that's super cool as well. And that's something that is a common part of anywhere that's magically saturated in Warhammer. That would include I don't want to use the term Realm of Chaos for the North, although Games Workshop often interchangeably uses Realm of Chaos for the Chaos Wastes up in the North. But in the Chaos Waste, where magic is exceedingly thick as it pours out of the Weeping Eye up in the North. So that's one place. But then there's a whole bunch of spiritually active places across Warhammer where magic's a thing. Right. And looking at the time, we should dive into our super chat so that we don't lose track of where we were.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I do believe we're sending Skylar. Hey, Skylar, thanks very much. What were you talking about Kremlo and his realm? Like, so just because you're going to have absolutely no idea what this is referencing. Kremlo was one of the original, let's be blunt, old ones, who was just a slan lizardman. Warhammer obviously changed, but Kremlo's still back there in the original editions, and he doesn't have a realm. He's just a slan. Let's just move on quickly, Skylar. Skylar comes in again. Oh, thanks, Skylar. Oh no, that's Brock. How challenging is it to write about a place where anything can happen and is constantly in flux? How do you make that engaging to readers and players?
That's a really good question. So I did some work on a role-playing game called Black Crusade, which is about playing Chaos Space Marines and Chaos cultists and Chaos aligned rogue traders and other, baddies of the setting. And that game is set in an area called the Screaming Vortex, which is a warp storm. Yeah. The thing about that that's really interesting, there are people out there who love to play around with the idea of reality as a suggestion rather than the law, the immutable law. So one of the things I've really enjoyed about it is just sort of presenting players with visions and sights of things. There's a thing about role playing that can kind of happen with someone playing. If they're deeply enough immersed, they can get that sense of awe and wonder from imagining something that they've never imagined before. And the Realm of Chaos and the Warp are both really interesting places because you can create vistas that are completely they're not even on the internet anywhere. Like, for example, in the Screaming Vortex, there's a planet I created that's kind of like a cored apple. It's just got like the upper hemisphere and then like a little stem, and it's just sort of hanging there in space because it can. Because in the warp, these things it wouldn't just like break apart like it would in the real world. Also, I think one of the most interesting things about it from a writing standpoint is that the warp is a place of metaphor. You can witness battlefields that you've never been to before, but that are part of the collective unconsciousness. You can see and interact with memories or dreams or visions. It is absolutely a wonderful place to sort of touch on some of those spiritual, maybe a little frou-frou, if you will, for the term, aspects of your character that you wouldn't ordinarily imagine. Like if you wanted to talk to if your character had a dead father and you're like, I always want to know what he would think about this or that. In the warp, you might have that conversation. Is that actually your dead father? No, absolutely not. It is not him, but it is probably a reflection of how you feel about him, right? And that is a really interesting character moment. So I apologize for hijacking there, but it was a really good question. Really, really.
Never apologize. This is how it works. There is no hijacking. We just kind of go. And everything said there, I wholeheartedly support and agree with. Hey, that was super easy for me to answer.
Woo!
I will say one other thing though. There's a difference between engaging players and readers because every group has got a different set of players, and you can get a bit more personal about their characters, about the stories that really work for that player rather than necessarily work for that character, because that character might have an absolutely superb backstory that you built with tragedy and death with their family, and you think, oh, it'd be really cool if we dive into this for some sort of cool story involving some warp related, aether related nonsense. This would be cool, but the player might not at all like that sort of thing because they've moved on from that. There was original backstory and they've got that wasn't cool, I'm moving on. And the player themselves might be much more interested in a different philosophical edge. So knowing your players means that you can pitch this really well. And often the biggest mistake that most GMs make when it comes to pitching this to their players is trying to do it themselves. Players like to collaborate. Ask, talk to them. Say, what do you think would be a super cool story that we could encounter for your player? Because then they are invested in making that story better. They're also more invested because it's partially their creation. And they will say, oh yeah, my character is affected by this because they decided their character was affected, rather than you as a GM impinging upon them your ideas of what must be most affecting to that character. So, yeah.
The last thing I'll add too is that going into the warp or the realm of chaos in either system should be one of the most terrifying things to ever happen to your characters. If they end up and they suddenly realize, oh my God, we're in the warp, there should be that clench, that sphincter clench moment of, oh, we are in so much trouble.
yeah, I don't just agree. I like hard agree, right? Where were we? Brock, and we have a big one coming. I've lost your comment, Brock. There it is. Charles, what's with Chaos Gods being more ascendant in 40k?
Okay, so complicated question, or complicated answer. Very simple question. Frankly, a lot of stuff that Andy was saying about the realm of chaos and like being a place where all of the gods live, that is kind of less clear in 40k. Like the gods that we know of that are existing that are not chaos gods, some of them are in the warp, some of them are not. Like Segarak, the god of the Harlequins, he lives in the webway, which is the webway exists as like a tunnel through the warp. He's not in the warp. He's in a little tunnel that's like, in the walls, if you will, of the warp. So are there gods that are other than the chaos gods that are doing stuff in the warp? Maybe, probably. Yeah, but the focus is almost always on the chaos gods. And I should point out, like, there are sources that say the Emperor, who is the great leader of the Imperium, the most powerful psyker to ever live, there are stories that say he is present in the warp as a being, as a godlike entity. So, yes, the chaos gods are ascended because they're focused on more in the lore. Like almost every time you talk about like, hey, there's this problem or there's this issue, it's usually kind of goes back to the chaos gods. And there's a reason for that, because foundationally, as part of 40k, if you look at like all the big massive events and the big massive tropes and the big massive themes, they can all kind of be traced back to chaos. Games Workshop is a big fan of this. They like saying that chaos is kind of the primordial originator, or if you will, of a lot of the plots and schemes and twists of the story of 40k. So it's just kind of a fact of the IP that the chaos gods are always going to be like, oh, they're a big thing. They're a massive force. Being more ascendant lately in 40k, well, there's a lot of things happening in the storyline of 40K right now. There's Primarchs returning from the dead. There is worries that the Emperor will be soon, completely gone, and what might happen after that. So it is a time of turmoil for 40K right now in the lore. The day that I'm speaking, the 10th of September, 2025. And that would explain why the lore at this time is very focused on the chaos gods being big and doing big things, because they're reacting to or responding to or are responsible for, depending on who you ask, all of the events that are occurring. And that's kind of the best answer I can give you without getting far more bogged down into detail than I think Andy would want. So
detail. I'll sum it up with a quick. In 40K, the Chaos Gods are very jealous of the enormous amount of power that they've managed to gather and fight any other gods moving into that space. And historically, they've kind of killed them all. And the only ones that they haven't killed have found a way to run away and hide. Kinda. So Warhammer. Oh yeah, I'm just going to give a comparison.
No, please.
On the Warhammer side, that's never happened. In fact, you could argue that the Chaos Gods are either arriving from elsewhere and are basically trying to impinge themselves upon the Warhammer world, or alternatively, if you go with some readings, they were birthed in the Warhammer world and moved out in a really weird way. The writing is really inconsistent in this, but they have only a small part of the far bigger whole if you want to try and put singular dimension upon it. Where in 40K, you tend to find that the Chaos Gods are kind of ascendant, and they've almost won.
So I should point out here something that's very different between Warhammer and 40K. In 40K, the gods are not sentient beings like they are in Warhammer. The gods of 40K, Nurgle, Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, specifically those four, they're more like natural forces, like a typhoon or a hurricane. They exist, they create events surrounding them because of the gravity of their power and presence, but they're not making choices. Like Khorne isn't just sitting there in 40K saying, aha, I will create another bloodthirster and send it to the Imperium. He's not thinking about that. He doesn't have that kind of thought process. They are cosmic forces. Just imagine Khorne as a really big red storm in the warp that is constantly churning, and little pieces of him are flying off because of all the turmoil that he creates by being himself. And those little pieces that come off, those are the bloodthirsters or the demon princes or the things that have sentience and can make decisions and choices that affect the world. But Khorne is not, I mean, they say the Tzeentch is the great schemer. He's not sitting there like, yes, exactly as planned. He is a force that spins off, the other greater demons that do those things, like Kairos Fateweaver and things like that. So that's the difference.
Hey, Garrett, thanks very much. Speaking of Fishman earlier, Ross, is there a lesser-known race in 40K that you're a big fan of? If so, could you describe them? Sorry for the specific question. Just love hearing about new stuff.
Garrett,
never be sorry.
Yeah. Garrett, great question. The minor race that I would like to draw attention to today is the Fra'al. The Fra'al are these highly psychic merchant traders, and they've only ever been shown as a ship in Battlefleet Gothic. Like, you could have Fra'al ships that like helped you out, and they're described, but they're never shown. The Fra'al are really, really interesting, but also I would say the Enslavers are a really cool, lesser known race. I created a Space Marine chapter called the Storm Wardens for Deathwatch. And the Storm Wardens and the Enslavers have a lot of history between them, because I thought the Enslavers were really, really neat. They really just exist as like some sketches. There's never really been like an Enslaver mini or anything as far as I'm aware. But they're super cool. And I would definitely recommend pointing out those two, the Fra'al and the Enslavers.
Yeah, I love the Enslavers. I've used them deeply in many of my campaigns. They're just the freaking best. Hey, Sean, thanks very much. What does Ross think of Gelt, Balthazar Gelt in this case? And as a great Warhammer Total War player, you know exactly who that is, the ruler of the Metal Wind. Are there sorcerers that live in the realm of chaos? Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a question for you, for sure.
First, Gelt.
Yeah, well, so Gelt, I would say, so I have way more hours of Total War Warhammer than I would like to admit to. I think it's something like 1,600 hours. And yes, I've played Gelt. He is great. I love this dude. I love the fact that he has his own agenda and that he and the College of Magic are these big movers and shakers in the world. And I love seeing him fly around on his Pegasus and absolutely destroy armies, because he is a one-man doomstack if you do him right. So yeah, absolutely.
He's a dick. Hate him. And if you ever reach 10,000 subscribers over on YouTube on the LAWhammer channel, you'll find out why I think he's such a fucking dick. Right, moving on. Dynaman. Moorcock, bingo card. Zing. Singmaster comes. How's the housing market in there? Oh, we didn't answer the other bit. Realms of Chaos, before I get that one, and Sorcerers. So first, the realm of Tzeentch is often referred to as the realm of the Sorcerer in various parts of Warhammer's background, and it is entirely populated by many of those who've ascended and become demons themselves. So those who used to once be mortal and have ascended into the realm of sorcerers and entered into the crystalline massive maze-like structures or whatever else there might be over there. So the answer is first, yes. All of the various greater demons, except for those of Khorne, tend to be magic users, sorcerers, depending on your preference as well. So yes. But then the last part is, do wizards themselves from the material realm go over there without ascending? And the answer is, from 4th edition onwards, yes. And it started off with a rule in 4th edition called Escape. You had the Escape card. So in Warhammer 4th edition, if you were killed and you were a wizard, you could have the Escape card, drop it, and you survived the battle, and you could pop back out later. What happened? You went into the realm of chaos and disappeared. And this got written directly into the fiction for Malekith/Malarian, who does this during one of the great battles in the Great War against Chaos. And when he and Teclis are having a fight, he loses one of those fights and then pops off into the realm of chaos and disappears for a good 100 years. And he sees things. Things happen, and Malekith changes, man. And he comes back completely different. So the answer is yes, it is something that can occur. If you've watched LAWhammer streams, you'll know that one of our characters has even done this. So it is an event that can occur, and it is life-changing, completely flips your entire world upside down. And going back to what the Singmeister was asking there, how's the house in market? It's strangely enough in flux in the realm of chaos. Yeah, that one amuses me. Alrighty, moving down to Dynaman. Oh God, Dynaman. So in 40k, that's a long comment, Dynaman. I have less patience for this than Sotek does. The gods of the warp seem to be entities which are directly tied to the emotions of the people in the galaxy. And as you fly away from the galactic plane, connections to the warp get weaker. In fantasy, this doesn't seem to be the case. Correct, although it is in some instances. Although it sometimes also is. Can you talk about why this is seeming to diverge and why DW seems to be somewhat more consistent in what they want from 40k Warp as compared to the fantasy Aether?
Ooh, okay, so there's a lot in that. About the emotions tying in and like the distance being a factor. Those things are probably less canonical to 40k. Over time, certainly my experience has been less that is a thing that is very, very rarely even referenced. As far as the like the divergence and why the 40k warp seems a little more defined, well, it's like this. Andy probably knows this. I'm sure he's probably heard it. But financially speaking, to Games Workshop, Warhammer 40k sells a lot more product. Like at one point, I was told directly from Games Workshop that Space Marines, just Space Marines, outsold all of their other products combined, to give you an idea of like how important that is to them financially. So that tends to translate into more oversight, more interest in keeping things consistent. And so that's one of the reasons why the Warp in 40k is just a little more strict. That's sort of like what it is and where it comes from. But even so, even with that being true, over time, and it's been, at this point, what, 35 years? Jesus.
Yeah.
Over time, as the thing, as the property goes through different hands and different handlers, it can change that viewpoint on what these elements need to be. Like what does it need to do? So Alan Merritt was the head of the IP at Games Workshop for a very long time. And he and I sat down when I was working on Rogue Trader, and he started to tell me about like what travel through the warp was like and why it was like that. Because in Rogue Trader, obviously, your ship moving from point A to point B is a big part of the game. And he would explain the warp a lot like the ancient early days of the Age of Sail, where if you set out from Port Mosby and you're trying to make it to Port Arthur, that's you're not sure how long that's going to take. You have an idea of like how long it should take, but it's going to be less or more depending on currents and storms and things like that. So Alan would say, okay, now take that and add demons and magic and crazy visions and all this stuff that can happen outside of your control, and travel through the warp becomes so much more dangerous, so much more daunting, and so much more mysterious than any travel that we've experienced on the sea throughout our history. So that's just like one aspect of it. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I think one of the primary reasons the 40K's warp is so cleanly defined is because it isn't used for as much. It's used for travel and the Chaos Gods. That's pretty much it. Okay, it's got other bits. Okay, but I'll let you come back in just a moment then. Where with Warhammer, they've got so many gods doing so much. They've got their paths and the old ones going through. They've got other dimensions beyond just the warp as well, with their spirit realms and their various other, the realm of Actuary. What exactly is that, and how's that different to the realm of Chaos? There's lots of other stuff, and writers with each edition have just kind of added to it rather than necessarily refined, where 40K has often just reiterated edition after edition after edition what came before, and often tightened it rather than necessarily expanding upon it. Where Warhammer, because I think actually very clearly put forward by Ross there, was not as much of a focus for Games Workshop. They didn't put so many eyes upon it, meaning that sometimes some weird shit got in. And if we take a look at some of the stuff that Black Library has added, or some of the weirder stuff in the periphery of the roleplay games, it flat out contradicts other bits that you'll find elsewhere in Warhammer. And the Aether, for want of a better word, has been massively expanded in lots of weird ways, where in 40K you tend to find its specific stories. And then it sort of wraps it up and ties it with a bow, and we're done because the core doesn't get touched.
That's very good. All I wanted to push back on a little bit is that the warp is only used for certain things. Okay, so there are gods like the gods of the Eldar. Some of them are in the warp. There are gods of other species, Gork and Mork. We're not sure where they are. They might be in the warp. There's like a god of the Tau now, which is kind of a weird thing, and that's like in the warp. So bizarrely enough, the warp does contain other gods than just the chaos gods. It is used for more than just travel. It's also, I should really point out, like it's also vital for interstellar communication, because if you want to send a message from Terra out to Macragge, you do that with an astropath who telepathically puts together this message, usually in the form of metaphors or ciphers or codes or images, and then like sends that out in a wave to Macragge, where another astropath will receive it, translate, interpret all those images and signs into a message that is then passed along to the people on Macragge. So it's travel. It's also navigation through the Astronomicon, which is the beacon that the God Emperor creates through his psychic abilities that allows ships to know where they are relative to Terra in the warp, because otherwise you'd be completely lost. So it is. I just wanted to push back. It is a little bit more than just travel. There's a lot going
really
on.
Flippant. Dynaman. That said, fantasy does have the Aether being used for travel, specifically the old ones before the gates collapsed. Yeah, so if you go back pre-Cataclysm, the old ones were using effectively the warp for their travel. And the Great Gate at North and South Pole were enormous gates that enormous ships would pass through as they move from one possibly dimension or other material place to the Warhammer world, and they translated backwards and forwards. But they also used them for personal travel across the Warhammer world. So you could be sitting what is the equivalent of modern day Lustria, move up to the Empire by just passing through a gate. There's also the paths of the old ones, which are somewhat similar to the Eldar Webway, in that there's a whole bunch of interconnected tunnels that make their way through the aether. And they've kind of collapsed in the modern Warhammer world. And they are mostly populated with demons and kind of awful. But some of them still work, and you can open a pathway from one part of the Warhammer world to another. And it's a matter of just walking along this path. And each one of these paths have got very different tone, possibly asserted by those who pass through it, as their minds effectively try to make sense of the weird dimension they moved into and reform up into a pathway through a dungeon. I was going to say jungle, and it turned into dungeon as I said it out loud, but either will do, a dungeon or a jungle. Whatever it may be that the mortal minds project and expect is what they encounter. A jungle, yeah, it's just like that. So yeah, they're used. They're used in a variety of ways, but then you've even got, when you go over to the Wood Elves, they've got the world routes that they can pass through, the Great Weave that they interact with. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can pass your way through, not just the old one portals, but modern versions of what are paths through the aether. So yeah, is the answer to that. Hey, Ricky Chapman, thank you very much. In our Warhammer TTRPG, that the aether and warp are the same and the settings overlap, which has led to one of our players' favorite characters, a demon prince, appearing in both settings, and quite right too. It happens to several demon princes. Nakari, for example, pops up in both settings. Exactly, good old Be'lakor. It's Be'lakor all along. Yeah, Be'lakor as well. A whole host of them have done it, and there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't. And as we've discussed in previous Lorebeards, I have also crossed over Warhammer 40k in more than one of my previous games, because why not? I mean, it's your own game at home. Games Workshop's police can't come round and say, you're not allowed to do that anymore. That's not how it's done. It's my game at home, and I'll do whatever I want. Thanks very much.
You know, I was working at Games Workshop 22 years ago. I'm so old. 22 years ago, I was working at Games Workshop when the very last product was made that combined the two settings, which was the Dark Shadows supplement, the Albion adventures. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I think Andy said he's talked about it before. That's when I started working in Games Workshop. So I came in at the very tail end of when those two settings were kind of connected, and the word on the street was always like, "Whoa, Sigmar is one of the lost Primarchs," you know, which is a really cool idea. I love the concept of it, frankly. But after that point, somewhere around 2003, is when the IP started to be far more segregated and separated from one another. But previous to that time, absolutely, you could say, oh yeah, the Warp and the Realm of Chaos, absolutely, same thing. Warhammer World, it's just a planet somewhere in the galaxy, you know, of 40k. But those things are no longer true, and haven't been true for 22 years. So
yeah, 22 years pretty much. Although having said that, if you go into even some of the most recent discussions of it in White Dwarf, they still say that the warp is the great connector of all things. So the Realm of Chaos sort of does connect everything, but they're no longer, Warhammer is inside the 40k universe. It's just a planet. It's a completely different dimension. It's something that is alien and not alike to 40k. The rules of Warhammer and the rules of 40k are effectively completely different to what they once were, where, I mean, there's a relatively famous quotation from Rick Priestley when he was discussing magic and psychers, and he said they are identical. Because then they were. They just were. But as later editions came on and the desire to make Warhammer much, much more of its own platform, and definitely not just a part of 40k, from certain writers, that pretty much became history rather than the current truth. Hey, Garrett, thanks very much. Would a blank traveling to the warp lead to a bad day for the demons nearby, or do blanks only harm psychers?
Okay, so this is a 40k question. I'm not sure that blanks or a concept like blanks even exists in Warhammer, to be clear.
No, there isn't. We had a discussion about this the other day when we were going through all of the Chaos Gods in Warhammer and how they could easily be added as a concept to one of the Chaos Gods in the Coho, but that's another stream.
So for anyone who doesn't know what a blank is, blanks are a very extremely rare genetic mutation in humans that makes them anathema to the warp. They can sort of cancel out psychic powers just by being nearby. Demons and other creatures of the warp don't like them. They can be kind of repulsed or even destroyed by them. So the question is, would a blank traveling to the warp lead to a bad day for the demons nearby? Well, if he's in a ship, no. Blanks travel around in ships all the time. Ships in 40K, at least in the Imperium, are protected by a field called a Geller field. And this field is a bubble of reality that sort of surrounds the ship and keeps the warp out from getting into the ship. So a blank traveling aboard a ship with a Geller field, he would probably, they wouldn't even know he was there per se. Now, do they affect demons? Yes, they absolutely do. Do they affect the warp in general? Yes, to a lesser extent, but still yes. A blank that was sent bodily into the warp without a ship to protect him would just sort of, he'd be dead just like anybody else. Dead of starvation, if nothing. I mean, even if they left him alone, he'd still just die. It's horrible. I can't imagine a blank surviving on his own in the warp. In fact, there's very, very few people that's ever even mentioned surviving in the warp longer than just like a few seconds. And usually those guys are absolutely legendary chapter masters of the Grey Knights or Primarchs or something of that nature. So there you go.
It's one of the, I'd say, almost differentiating things between 40K and Warhammer as well, because there are multiple examples of characters from the Warhammer world being thrown into the aether and sometimes being there for freaking ages and coming back the other side going, yep, that was a thing that happened. Let's move on. In 40K, I think the earlier quotation, the Chaos Gods are an ascendant, really neatly sums up why it's so fucking dangerous by comparison. It's just quite a different atmosphere on the other side. Yeah, not good, so good. Surrogate Gaia, thanks very much. I wanted to add this headcanon during the Mork and Gork stream, but here goes. Okay, the Winds of Magic have a dampening effect on the greenskins, which messes with their innate ability to construct complex machinery. It would explain why they can create them in fantasy, why they can't, create them in fantasy, and it would also be a potential way the old ones kept them under control during the War in Heaven. All of that is not a bad headcanon. There has to be a reason if you are assuming that the greenskins from Warhammer are the same as 40K, and the general assumption is they kind of are. There's got to be a reason why they kind of aren't. Why haven't they, red ones go faster, started building freaking gargants everywhere? They haven't. There are no big, huge trucks wandering around the various planes of Warhammer. That doesn't happen. Where is the technological backstop? So this is one way of doing it. Thanks, Surrogate Guy. So the warp doesn't provide you the actual answers. It predicts the answers based on the collective experience of humankind. Is the warp ChatGPT? ChatGPT is certainly chaos.
Any suggestion that generative AI is actually the source of all evil, I will probably say, yeah, that sounds legit. That sounds legit to me.
I love this. That's just brilliant. Don't trust your generative AI.
Well, to be clear, if I could go back just briefly there, does the warp provide actual answers? It can. Very famously, the Primarch Magnus the Red learned that his brother Horus had turned against the Emperor through a vision in the warp. Now, obviously, many people will jump in here and say, well, that was Tzeentch giving him the vision. Maybe it was. What we know is he saw that vision in the warp. We know that to be true. So does the warp give you actual answers? It can. And that's all I wanted to point out.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent over in Warhammer, where the Aether is arguably a source of an enormous amount of potential lore. Why do you think demonologists exist in the first place? It's not just to summon up a big demon so that they can kill the person who's run off with the person that they fancy. Demons can provide answers, and answers are cool. But are those answers real? Are they true? Thanks, ChatGPT. Who knows? Brock6000, how did the Liber Chaotica influence your perspective of the Aether/warp? Liber Chaotica is a great book, and if you haven't read it, Ross, I recommend it. It's one book per chaos power, and it also crosses over into 40K. It's written from the perspective of characters in the Warhammer world, and it has entire sections about their visions of the great weirdness that is 40k that lies beyond. And the Liber Chaotica, which was written by MVS, Marian von Stauffer, is a bloody brilliant book, actually. Brilliant set of books. And from my perspective, they influenced me quite a bit because there was a lot in there that was great. Really good writing. And that's pretty much all you can ask for when you're attempting to dive into a subject which can be as tricky and as difficult to pin down as Chaos. But yeah, from my side, it did.
So this is a really interesting thing that just brought up, actually talking about this, is, this whole topic about the realm of chaos and the warp is it is a connective thread between the two IPs, and it is. And classically, that connective thread started with a book called The Realms of Chaos, which, Andy's talked about at length. I mentioned briefly with Brian Ansel and Ian Miller. And so the Liber Chaotic is also connecting the two together, is very much in theme. It makes the realm of chaos, it makes chaos in general kind of the hinge that allows those two worlds to connect, like the little apogee where they come closest to one another is through that lens of chaos. So definitely the Realms of Chaos books, the Liber Chaotica books, they have influenced me, but like Andy says, they're primarily from the perspective of Warhammer, and my perspective has been locked in so hard into 40k that I read them once a long time ago, and I haven't really touched them since. So I'm sure they're a little more impactful for Andy than for myself.
Good evil. Thank you. Were any Warhammer writers into the cult? Yes. Into. Yes. Into's not the same as following, but into as in they've read up on, definitely. I've been reading a lot of Crowley and Gardner for my masters, and the warp seems pretty much the same. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, yes is the answer, Gneevil. Yes. Still loading. Ross, do you have a most hated or least favorite character? Like fucking Gelt, that dick.
Okay, I don't want to talk about a character I hate, but I will talk about a character I like to make fun of, if that makes sense. There is a character in 40k that I will always bring up as often as I possibly can, because it encapsulates some of the crazy weirdness of 40k in a way that I really enjoy. And that is a particular Chaos Space Marine who happens to be a motorcycle fanatic. They call him the Doom Rider. And Doom Rider is just absolutely it's my favorite guy to bring up and make fun of, because he looks like he has completely gone nuts on cocaine. And his hair is just, I mean, this guy is he's basically the Knight Rider from Mad Max, right? But just turned into a Chaos Space Marine and cranked all the way up to 12, higher than 11. It's a 12. And he's riding around on his bike. The memes about this guy, just, oh my God. So yeah, Doom Rider is the one I would bring up, is the one I like to make fun of the most. Do I hate him? No, I don't hate him, but he is hilarious.
Yep, love that. Brock 6000, thank you very much for what you're about to do. Hey, Space Ross, you can shamelessly plug anything you want. You've just been given the space. This is why the Lorebeard crowd are just the best. You rock, Brock. What do you say to that, Mr. Space Ross?
First of all, thank you so much. That is a heck of a gift, and I deeply appreciate it. So what I would say is, Andy, I don't know if you can do this, but I do have a Patreon that I would like to plug and steer people towards. If you're interested in behind the scenes stories about the games I've worked on, if you're interested in cool RPG mechanics or characters or locations or magic items, my Patreon's a great place to find that. I think Andy's working on getting the link up here, but that's what I would use. Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. That was very nice of you.
Yeah, isn't Brock the best? Thanks, Brock. And the links are sitting right now inside the comments, because I can post them, which is nice. Alrighty, moving down from Brock, we go to Charles C.K. Is writing things for 40k made complicated by the fact that the Imperium are incredible bad guys, but not all of the audience always gets that? Oh, they're coming out with the doozies now. So I'm going to sit back and eat my popcorn.
The short answer, yes. The long answer, honestly, this is something I would love to do an entire show on, is talk about the satire of 40k and how that's kind of changed and drifted over the years since its creation. Because originally, the Imperium was absolutely a satire of Thatcherism in the 80s in Britain, in UK in the 80s. The Imperium is, and it is often described as, the most brutal, oppressive regime imaginable. And yet, every time we dive into the IP, we do it through the eyes of citizens, heroes, soldiers, defenders of this regime. And you know, it's often characterized as like, well, yeah, but everything else is worse, which to a degree is still true. Is it complicated? Yes. And this is something, again, Andy and I would love to just go ham on this with Andy at some point in the future. But thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, Charles, because you know that I have opinions in this one.
We have thoughts.
So, yeah, this is rather amusingly. We've discussed this a lot in the past, and I'm always reminded of something that my wife said when we were passing Games Workshop once. So that's the Warhammer store, because I still live in the old world in my head where it still says Games Workshop, not Warhammer, above the stores. We're passing through, and we had literally said something along the lines of, the Space Marines are basically the front for the bad guys. They're bad guys. They're a proper totalitarian regime. They're the worst. Okay, but the Space Marines aren't heroes, are they? We passed the shop, and this just gigantic image of a Space Marine looking fucking awesome. It's the classic image of fascism, because they know how to make things look cool. They know how to hook you in, but they've lost their ability to realize that what they're touting to kids was once something very different. And you can understand why a lot of people look on to 40K nowadays and go, and pull a face and feel a bit uncomfortable, because yeah, they've not changed the fact that 40K are the bad guys, but they have changed how they talk about them. And every once in a while, you'll get somebody from Games Workshop saying something along the lines of, you've got to remember that 40K is a satire, with no context, with no actual view as to why it's a satire or how it's a satire. But they
or
definitely
what it's a satire of.
Or what's a satire of. They definitely say something along the lines of, oh, it's a terrible place. It's terrible, as they hand wring away. Oh, it's the worst. Yeah, okay, we're moving along now. By the way, go buy our next book full of absolutely cool heroes doing heroic stuff and killing bad guys. So, yeah. Does it make it hard? I think so, but not for all writers, because some writers literally don't care. They're just writing about their heroes kicking in bad guys, forgetting, well, you know, that maybe it's a bit more complicated than they like to admit. Hey, Lord Inquisitor, thank you very much. Hey, there's two Lord Inquisitors here. Let me just bring this one down. Lord Inquisitor Ross Watson. Lord Inquisitor, are you talking to yourself?
I did not do this.
Some of the more interesting side effects if the real world was suddenly exposed to the winds of magic and the Aether or the 40K warp, aside from what the fuck, oh no, love your lore streams. Thanks very much, Lord Inquisitor.
Well, there are planets. There are planets that exist in the warp in 40K. I would not want to live there. I don't think anybody would want to live there. They're horrible. The only things that would be halfway cool is if you were like happen to be an absolute nut for old school heavy metal album covers, because you'd see that everywhere.
That'd be awesome,
right? That guy, that one guy would be like, "Oh my god, yeah!" But everybody else,
here come the Noise Marines.
Yeah, it is awful, horrible. Society as we know it would be gone, and the worst aspects of our ids would rule, and that's really all I could say about it.
Yeah, so we sort of have this to a degree in a variety of places, because obviously there are planets that are inside the warp, are right on the periphery of the warp. But it's different to, yeah, exactly. It's different to what we have over in the Warhammer world, because the Winds of Magic aren't flooded with warp energy. That's not what the Winds of Magic are. The Winds of Magic are a different thing. And the Winds of Magic change things around them in different ways. The effect of the warp tends to be exactly as described. It brings almost imagination to life. It does some strange stuff. The Winds of Magic are empirical. They have actual effects that are scientifically capable of being recorded. They are much more consistent, much more grounded in the real world. So if you've got lots of Gyron in an area, the light wind of magic, the life magic, the green wind of magic, Gyron gets you really excited. Let's put it a nice way. Gyron fills you with life and gets you good to go. And all living creatures in the Warhammer world have Gyron within them, meaning that even sterile creatures in the Warhammer world are sometimes not sterile. Because the Warhammer world is different to the real world. Fire can burn in the Warhammer world for far longer. Because if there's actually being attracted to the fire, it burns on the actually, not on the fuel that it's consuming. And that doesn't require anything. So what happens in the Warhammer world is lots of little differences. Lots of things are different. Heish, the light wind of magic, gathers around holy areas, meaning that almost all holy areas are much more intelligentsia focused, because it is also the wind of enlightenment, the wind of intelligence. And that brings a higher level of thought to many of the greater establishments of the Warhammer world than you get elsewhere. But it's genuinely recordable. That's different to warp energies, which are a fucking mess and go up and down all over the place, oscillating in such a fashion that, yeah, you could record it, but it would say, this shit is bullshit. Who knows what's going to go on? Let's rock. Yeah, here comes Doom Rider. It's a mess. And the Warhammer world isn't a mess. And the fact that it isn't a mess in many respects show you why it's different. And it's good that it's different, because if it wasn't, it would just be another 40k realm. And that would make it less interesting. So it's fun to see that Warhammer is different. So what would happen to the real world if suddenly we got the winds of magic? Well, we'd have lots of people suddenly activating with magic, capable of using magic in a variety of ways. And the world itself would be different, because each one of the 8 winds, plus others if you believe they exist, would be influencing the world in a variety of ways that no one would expect. In fact, if we didn't have a vortex or some equivalent, we'd also have demons, because they could manifest in the real world and everything would go very wrong quite quickly and it would suck. Yay! Dynamite! It's kind of ironic. Warp, less detail and filled with less going on, but more explored and obviously integral at the surface level. Aether, a lot more complex, has a lot more going on, somewhat more easily ignored on surface level in fantasy. Yeah, actually, I don't disagree, and that's fair. Hey, Brock6000, thank you very much. What is your favorite aspect area of the realm of chaos?
Good
question.
That's a really key question. There's a lot going. Well, if you want to talk about areas of the realm of chaos, for me, I have a very specific place I'm going to mention here. Castle Drachenfels. So awesome. So cool. And the realm of chaos and the castle are connected in ways that make it really fascinating, because if you're in the shadow of the Castle of Drachenfels and you look up at it, you have to count how many towers you can see, because the actual physical castle doesn't really have any towers remaining. It's been destroyed. But the castle as a concept, as an idea that exists in the realm of chaos, it's still there. So if you look up at the castle and you see multiple towers, you're like, oh, this is bad. And don't ever spend the night at the Castle Drachenfels during what's that?
Geheimnisnacht.
Geheimnisnacht, yes. Don't do it. Do not.
Or Hexensnacht as well, which is the night of witches at New Year's Day every day.
So Castle Drachenfels for me.
Yeah, makes sense. I love it. The Demons and the Chaos books dive into this a fair bit in Warhammer, where we actually get a map of the Realm of Chaos, which is sometimes mistakenly believed to be the actual map of what the Realm of Chaos is like, rather than just one artistic rendition of all the craziness that you could find there. Whether it's the Forge of Souls or the various corners of the map that are dedicated to Tzeentch, to Khorne, to Slaanesh, to Nurgle. Do I have a favorite place? I mean, I've always quite liked the big hunting fields of Khorne, because the very first descriptions of it were so baroque and just awesome. Also, Crystal Labyrinth always goes down well for me over with Tzeentch. That great maze labyrinth style from the movie Labyrinth, with the great structure right in the middle, the impossible fortress in there. That's always fun. But yeah, there's loads of cool places. The Bastion Stair has been kicking around since pretty much Warhammer 3rd edition and gets reported into each edition afterwards. So that's a cool, fun place too. Okay, moving back over to my wife, who just dropped in to watch her husband and found out that he seems to have spawned an American twin. Let me also pop this one. Hat, check. Glasses, check. Slightly graying facial hair, yeah, check. Obsession with Warhammer, oh my god, check.
As far as I know, we're not related, but we certainly could be.
Not wrong. Ricardo Andre, do you think the Winds of Magic can exist in 40k as well? It's just not tapped due to lack of extra senses, hence direct tap into warp rift as the gates, and the materium as the material world.
Okay, so the short answer, no. The long answer is psychic powers and sorcery are a big wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey ball that depends very much on your perspective. If you have the Imperial perspective, the Imperium's perspective on this stuff is that it's all psychic powers, it's just different flavors and expressed in different ways. If you were, however, from the planet of sorcerers, and one of Magnus's disciples, you might say, no, it's all actually sorcery. It's only expressed differently in the Imperium through they try to conceptualize it in a different way. So the Winds of Magic specifically, no, they do not exist in 40k. Just like Andy said, they're a very different thing. There are aspects of the warp that can generate effects very similar to those winds. So yes, kind of, but not really. So that's the answer I can give you.
I agree completely. Kind of, but not really. And I think often the descriptions used by writers when they attempt to cross over is, kind of, but not really, as they sort of sit there flailing wildly, attempting to justify their choices. Loosely speaking, Warhammer and 40k have been separated once they were the same. And the answer to this would have been yes, absolutely. And the Winds of Magic in 40k are just warp influence that has seeped into the 40k realm, where the veil between reality and unreality, the materium and the immaterium, has thinned. That changed over time significantly. Yes, I
did think of something. So you remember how you were saying that in Warhammer they call it the ether? Possibly the best term that's analogous to that in 40k is the Empyrean. The Empyrean. Mm-hmm. The Empyrean is a term that is used to kind of represent the warp as a whole, like the ether is for the realms of chaos. So that might be the best way to put it. Is like, it's the ether or the Empyrean are the two. Sorry, thank you. I just thought of that.
Yeah, and I agree. It's perfect. And pops up a lot in the roleplay game as well, because they tend to take a somewhat more let's say judicial view, where they're being a bit more careful not to just go, oh, it's chaos, which can be a thing. David Whitfield, thanks, David. Good to see you. In 40k, Rogue Trader, there were vampires. There was even scenario ideas where a planetary governor was a vampire. Do they exist still in 40k, or have they been thrown into the aether? Oh, the Carnosaur!
Carnosaurs are great. Yes, there were vampires. Vampires existed in the they were canon up through 3rd edition, I believe. There were still images of them in the books for 40k. I have not ran into any references to vampires in a very long time that were outside of, say, the Blood Angels Space Marine chapter, which they're basically vampires. But do space vampires exist in 40k? Yes, they are still somewhere. They exist. They're just such a minor thing that it just doesn't come up anymore. But they're
not needed for the battle game, so they don't pop up there. But when it comes to the roleplay game, they were in Rogue Trader, the 1st edition of 40k, rather than Rogue Trader, the roleplay game. And because they were in Rogue Trader, they will never go away, because Games Workshop constantly recycles its old material, and they will go back to the source again and again and again. So we will constantly see re-envisaged versions of things like Enslavers, or things like what the Ambull used to be, or whatever. They'll pop up again and again. Yeah, Ambulls are awesome. Also in Warhammer.
Yeah, Andy right here is speaking great wisdom. Listen to this man. He is absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah, that's so. Yes is the answer. Aphotep, Zinch, having a field day messing up the Emperor's plans by telling people the truth is so in character.
100% agreed. That is, oftentimes the truth is the greatest weapon against your enemy.
So I think there's always something worth just gently saying here. Zinch is the great architect. Great architect is also the god of fate. He understands things in a way that none of the other deities do. Unless, of course, we go with Warhammer, and then we start talking about Morai Heg or any of the other various deities over there who can not only perceive everything that could come, but are also responsible for cutting the strings of life of everything that's around. But Tzeentch absolutely has access to all of it. So the answer is yeah. And whatever best helps Tzeentch do Tzeentchy shit is going to land. Hey, Dodo Archaeology, thank you very much. If the warp connects 40k and fantasy, can we have a story about someone from our world going to Malice and vice versa? Malice. Oh, I'm never going to be happy with the Malice name. It's an Age of Sigmar port.
Oh my god.
Retconning. Yeah. Where the central core of the Warhammer world, called Malice, got ported back and turned into the entire Warhammer world's name.
Yeah, isn't that okay? Well, there's a lot going on there with Malice, and I'm not going to touch that because Andy's going to know far more about that than I am. So let's just be clear about that. But could we have an isekai into 40k or into fantasy? Hell yes, and I would love to write that story. I mean, can you imagine someone like myself going, "Oh my god," and then realizing, number one, I know far more than anybody else around me about what's actually going on, and number two, the absolute existential terror I would feel realizing where I am. I would probably find the closest gun and just shoot my own brains out if I was actually in 40k. But it would be a great story, certainly, short story.
So to run this down, Warhammer 40k is the future of our world. Okay.
In the grim darkness of the far future.
Far future. It's our future. So we're currently sticking around about Warhammer 2k. Warhammer 40k, okay, is what is to come, which means Tzeentch is a part of the real world, which means our world is connected through the Immaterium to 40k and Warhammer. So the answer to this is expressly yes, because we go back to earlier in the stream where you said, could you go into the warp and then come out at a different time? And the answer is yes. And this happens a lot in Warhammer, in particular when we're referring to, say, the Silver Towers of Tzeentch, or when we're dealing with any of the various time-manipulating types of magic, typically laid down with Amethyst magic, although Amethyst doesn't sound like it's got manipulation of time in it. It totally does. Or Celestial magic, which is about looking forward in time rather than looking back, which is mostly what Amethyst is. So the answer is a hard yes, because our world is part of the Warhammer world.
I like that perspective, Andy. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's fun, huh? Hey, what about that? How do we bring up Mechanical Beanstalk? I can just imagine one right now. Ross, you have to finally express your distaste for Lizardmen to Sotek. Say something like, they're a little too fancy for me. Yeah, Sotek does love his Lizardmen.
Okay, so I hate to disappoint you, my good friend, because my very first and favorite Warhammer army is Lizardmen. I love the Lizardmen. I'm a big fan, and I literally cannot say I don't like them because I do. And they were kind of my gateway into the Warhammer side of the IP. So
sorry, my first Warhammer army. I think I'm going to change every time that I think about what my first Warhammer army was.
For me, it was Lizardmen. Absolutely, 150%. We actually, so I worked on a thing called Warbands for Warhammer back in 2003. Yeah. Warbands was this cool little kind of like kill team, but for Warhammer. Mm-hmm. And the warband that I chose specifically was like a Saurus warrior, some Croxagors, and some skanks and some salamanders. And I was just like, yeah, baby, woo! For the great plan of the old ones, you know. I was just like, let's go. So I was really into it.
He's happy. Dynamite 95. Given Necron-Tech cancels out warp stuff, do you think it would have a similar effect on the Winds of Magic? See, that's spicy, because the answer is we don't know, obviously, because Necron-Tech does its own thing in 40k and the Winds of Magic are in Warhammer, so it's all going to be supposition and guesswork. And in truth, the answer would be whatever the story requires at hand, and it would work that way in that story. And there is no express answer, but I could build a really good argument for both sides.
I will say this, Necron-Tech absolutely does have an impact on the warp in a way that very few other technologies do. Just look at the pylons on Cadia as a really good example of this. Maybe. I'm gonna. Andy's the expert. I'm gonna go with him on this, but I think he's on the right track.
I could do both. I could build a really strong argument for why the Winds of Magic would be repulsed, absolutely repulsed, leaving an area that was entirely dead in the Warhammer world equivalent. No magic in that area at all, which would be anathema to demons. It would be terrible for wizards and sorcerers who moved into the area and suddenly all of their fuel is gone. It's just gone. Everything that they use as the winds drift in and out has just deadened. That would be super cool. But equally, you could build a really cool story where it's anti-warp, not anti the empirical stuff that is the Winds of Magic. So the Winds of Magic could still flow through. I could go with either and build a really cool story that would work well for both as well. So,
well, if I may, it's not that Necron-Tech is anti-warp. It's just that it's so advanced. It, as Arthur C. Clarke would say, it is sufficiently advanced to be able to interact with the warp. In fact, the Imperium has technology that interacts with the warp and does things with the warp. It just happens to be highly forbidden and only accessible to very small, very certain groups in the Imperium and heretics outside of the Imperium or within the Imperium as well. It's heresy is a weird thing. But anyway, yes, just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, Sir Panza, it was a bloody coup, by the way. Glaciadi continuing the age-old Scottish tradition of bloody coups. Sotek, where is he? Who knows? And I've already washed my hands. Is this blood I see? No! How would you make role-playing Space Marines interesting, as they can be quite boring on an individual level? Controversial question.
Okay, so I have a great perspective on this, because that was literally my job when I created the Deathwatch role-playing game. How do you make role-playing Space Marines interesting? So the thing about Space Marines is, I mean, they're basically a weapon or a monster, if you will. They're sort of wrapped in a human skin and made to look like a person. But what's really fascinating about them, the thing that draws people into Space Marines more than anything else, is their relations with each other and with the Imperium at large, because their chapter is where all the traditions and the beliefs and the culture comes from, right? And that's what's kind of interesting, at least for me, when I think about like my favorite Space Marine chapters, is like, what does that mean? What does that culture do? And how do they interact with other people outside of it? Some of the most recent lore actually is with the Lion returning. Lionel Johnson, one of the Primarchs, has returned, and him meeting the Blood Angels for the first time post the death of their Primarch Sanguinius was fascinating, because it was really interesting to see how one chapter would look at another, or the Primarch of another. So that to me is what the most interesting part. That's why Deathwatch was the vector through which I wanted to approach the idea of role-playing Space Marines, so you could bounce off of each other with all your different chapters and your rivalries and your beliefs and your traditions that are different from one another. Space Marines are not just robots. They're not like, hey, I wake up, I pray, I grab my bolter, I train, and then I shoot enemies of the Imperium. They have their own individual goals and desires as well, but to a lesser extent, post-heresy, it's one of the most fascinating things is that like pre-heresy Space Marines are way more individualistic and way more able to make their own choices than Space Marines post-heresy, which is frankly, it's fascinating. But anyway, yeah, that's the goal, I would say, is that Space Marines can be very interesting if you look at their place in the world and how the world reacts to them, how they react to the world. Because the Space Wolf will react very differently than a Dark Angel or a Black Templar ever would. So there you go.
So that, for me, the only thing I'll add on to this one is that it's particularly a question that gets posed by older players of 40k. Because they remember back in second edition, really, where it got driven hard when Andy Chambers was writing a significant amount of the ground and foundational lore that was getting pushed in. And the Space Marines back then, the warrior monks that they were, many of them were exactly that. Quite boring. And it didn't feel like they would be at all something you could write interesting stories or books about. Games Workshop sold billions of Space Marines. So that changed. And they had to become something that they could write about. They had to become something that they could focus upon and give real character to. So Space Marines, over the course of the editions, massively changed. And we look at the very first fictional view when was it Ian Watson when he did Space Marine? Yes, it was. Ian Watson when he did Space Marine. And then you take a look through all the novels that have come afterwards and how much extra character has been given to the Space Marines. Their initial descriptions for their first chapter approved iterations, for example, for Rogue Trader, were basically thoughtless, chem-gelded, brought out whenever war was needed, war machines. Chanting prayers, perhaps, but many of them weren't even capable of doing that. They were nothing more than death merchants. That changed significantly.
We could do a whole show on the evolution of 40K as an IP and like where it started and how it ended up, because I mean, let's just say that is a huge topic. I would love to get into it, but not today.
It's not happening today. I mean, today we're just sort of answering questions and having a laugh with Realms of Chaos as a theme. So let's move on to that. But actually, Mr. Ross, says Garrett, what was your first experience with the Warhammer universe and how old were you?
So I'm going to presume when you say Warhammer universe, you mean
I'd say both. Fantasy
like the hobby,
and the hobby as a whole.
Yeah. So I was about 13, I think, and I was sitting in my grandparents' living room, and I was opening up an issue of Dragon magazine because I was a huge D&D nerd. Loved D&D, loved it to an unhealthy extent, frankly. And I was reading Dragon magazine, and I turned the page, and there was this advertisement, full page advertisement. So half of it was about the Space Marines, and half of it was about Warhammer. And it was fascinating because the Warhammer side was it was actually an ad for the Goblobber, if you remember the old Goblobber, and it was how the dwarves would round up goblins and put them in their catapults and fire just a big old tangled group of goblins. And I was like, oh my god, that's kind of awesome, right? But above that, and this is kind of where my love of 40K started, was this little fiction blurb next to a picture of some Space Marines, and these are the old beaky, Space Marines, the very, very first Space Marines. And I was reading it, and it talks about how like they were waiting to ambush some orcs, and an orc spit over the side, and his saliva landed on the bolt gun, and the Space Marine's like, I will have to avenge this slight to my weapon. And I'm thinking to myself, that's rad. I don't know why, but that's rad as hell. So yeah, Dragon magazine and an advertisement for two that were there. It was a full page, but it was split in between the two things. That was my first exposure, and I was about 13 years old.
13. Avotep. Thank you very much. Everything else being worse than 40K is at least partially the Emperor's and the Imperium's fault.
For sure.
Definitely.
For sure.
And that's as it should be. The Imperium is not a good place, and the Emperor, he made some really rubbish choices.
Okay, so the Games Workshop, specifically, has told me to my face that the Emperor is the greatest of everything, but he is also profoundly flawed. And that is true for all of his sons. That is true for everything he built. It is the greatest, but it is also profoundly flawed. And that's always the lens that I look at the Emperor through, is that he is beyond all of our capabilities, but at the same time, he is also beyond all of our mistakes. So many mistakes.
Yeah. Hey, Crisps, thanks. Given the Realm of Chaos connects the two settings, how can demons in one setting conquer worlds but fail to conquer one in Warhammer Fantasy? What explains the disparity? So I can quickly answer this. One, they conquered it. They did. They conquered it. They won. Okay, you're wrong with your initial premise. Warhammer World blew up. Okay, it went bye-byes. And it took some time, about 10,000 years. Okay, but they did do it. So from Cataclysm through to End Times, it did go. But as we look at the story of Warhammer and into Age of Sigmar, we can clearly state that there's something different about the Warhammer world to the various other realms that have been conquered by chaos. There's something really special about the fated place that is the Warhammer world. And the old ones themselves appear to have planned what has occurred. And if we go into Age of Sigmar lore, it's quite clear that they intend to kill the Chaos Gods. That's ultimately what it boils down to. And the Warhammer world is at the heart of everything that involves. Now, what that means for individual versions of it as you're playing at home means nothing. It's just a nice overarching question we can look at. But the Warhammer world isn't like 40k, because the Warhammer world has its winds of magic. It has this weird thing where technology just doesn't port. And we've got all manner of demon engines, okay, that require demons to make them work, but actual tech seems to fall apart in a variety of ways. So yeah, it's an interesting place.
Okay, so this is actually I saw this comment fly by and I wanted to bring it up, but you mentioned demon engines. There's going to be a question about them for sure coming up. I can see that.
Excellent. Looking forward to that one coming. So after crisps, because I accidentally scrolled down there, I'm gonna have to scroll back up. Where was I? I have lost my place. There we are. Kubaj, Kubai. Oh, I've said it all wrong. Who cares? Yeah, that'll do. Thank you very much. Hi, Andy and Ross. Does Malice have a world spirit like Fenris? And if not, could you create one? Also, would Warhammer humans be compatible with Gene Seed?
I can answer the second part. Yes.
Let's go.
Yes, Gene Seed is far more adaptable and compatible with things than people know. And pre-heresy, for example, you could have elderly people could be somewhat compatible and could even become Astartes. You can look at Lorgar's father, Corferin, is a good example of this. His adoptive father, not his real father, obviously. So yes, Gene Seed is compatible with Warhammer humans for sure. The world spirit, though, that's a question I think I'm going to let Andy handle.
It's really complicated because there are already so many other gods, deities et al. In the Warhammer world. If we were to just look at the lore as a whole and somewhat holistically answered, could this be the case? There probably already is some form of deity tied to it that's just never been properly explained. So the answer is probably yes. But we also have deities like, say, Azurin, who is the divine creator of all, if we believe the elves. And the world itself is Azurin's creation. The world of Warhammer, as we know from the old ones, wasn't created in this fashion. So what does it all mean? And that ultimately is the answer. It's somewhere lying between the lines of the words, as yet to be properly depicted. But the answer is absolutely yes. It could be the case, and it probably is the case, but it wouldn't be anything that special because so much of the Warhammer world is caught up with spiritual energies and spiritual effigies. Every river in the Empire has got some god attached to it. The Athalloran is literally teeming with not just hundreds or thousands, but millions of spirits of various types. And they're all attached to the bigger spiritual whole. So the answer is kind of yeah.
Yeah, Athalloran, home of Tree Hitler.
Oh, we know a stream's going well when we've arrived at Hitler.
No, specifically Durthu, Tree Hitler.
Yeah, Durthu. Oh, we had a great stream about Durthu. He's great. Skylar Martin, selling 40k with Space Marines strikes me as not dissimilar to Disney selling Star Wars with Stormtroopers, Darth Vader. Just forget their villains. Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
But
at least in Star Wars, they are the villains. And they are used as the villains, and they are always displayed as the bad guys. In 40k, they're not.
I would throw some caveats in there. Obviously, the expanded universe and Star Wars. Anyway. Suffice to say, generally speaking, you are correct about that. But it's important to realize here this is kind of just a function of capitalism. Stormtroopers sell, Darth Vader sells, Space Marines sell. Therefore, they sell because they're cool. I have stuff I've bought. So yeah, it's just a thing, and it will continue to be a thing as long as they sell. So there you go.
Yep, agree completely. Thanks, late stage capitalism, and what it brings us. Tacitly supporting fascism with our every purchase. Hey, Mikhail, I'll see. Almost certainly said your name wrong. Apologies. What are your opinions on some people who say there is zero connection in any way, shape, or form in reference to the setting of Warhammer and one presumes 40k?
Well, if I may, I would say there is. I can certainly understand that viewpoint. Like there has been, since we've talked about this, for 22 years, there has been a concerted effort by Games Workshop to split them apart, to make them their own separate things. And so, yeah, if you are a fan that has come around since 2003, it's very likely that you are thinking that those things are completely separate and there is no connections between them. But the more you immerse yourself in the lore, the more you check out the miniatures and like the stories that are based around them, the more you come closer to the mountain, like where the gurus, Andy and I, have seated ourselves on top of piles of lore. The closer you reach that pinnacle, you will learn that these things are far more intimately connected than anyone knows. And again, we can do a whole show on it.
Yeah, that's a show just wanting to happen, isn't it? And the answer is exactly what he just said. Dynaman, thanks very much again. Bouncing off Chelsea K's comment, Andy, and also for Sotek, I really recommend reading the Votan lore. I already have. They are obviously problematic in their own way, but they also disprove like 90% of Imperial Dogma, and it's great. And I agree, complexity 100%. And different views is what makes settings better.
Yeah,
and yeah, I love it. So yeah, already been in there. And I think Sotek has touched upon it. I don't know if he's read it. I read it up all again relatively recently, just because I was having a discussion about things being squatted, and I was like, I'm going to go read that again. I've gone on the wrong side. Let's just put it. I particularly like the gorgeous. I didn't mean to bring this comment up, but apparently I have. I particularly like the Forge of Souls, says Gonzalo Vincenti. I've almost certainly pronounced your name completely wrong, and so do I. It's one of those lovely connections because it's in the realm of Khorne and fantasy. It's quite clearly there. Go over to 40k. We've got Vashtor doing this crazy shit. Forge of Souls most certainly there. It's one of those connecting points, and many folks do indeed come up with this one from Dynoman. Do you think Hashut could fulfill Vashtor's role as the ruler? He's rolling it down this, as the ruler of the Forge of Souls in fantasy. So Hashut, the Chaos Dwarf Ancestor God, now confirmed because of Age of Sigmar. He's not just a Chaos God, he was a dwarf once, an Ancestor God. And could he fulfill that role? Yeah.
He's a chorf, actually, a Chaos.
let's be right, a chorf. But yeah, you could. It's not the case so far. The Forge of Souls in Warhammer has not been connected to that. But could it be? Yes. Could that make a good story? Yes. Does it disrupt some of the core themes of Khorne and the mechanical extras that Khorne has, and the clear underneath it all weirdness that sort of suggests that Khorne's a bit of a smith, with all of his weapons and all of his greater demons holding great weaponry, and many of his lesser demons being mechanical. Does it undermine that to a degree? A little bit, because the Forge of Souls in Warhammer is literally placed inside the realm of Khorne sometimes. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because the Chaos Gods are meant to be constantly fighting and making allies and deals and things going one way or the other. I think it could fit quite well.
So Smith deities are very common in both settings. Obviously Vol exists in both 40k and fantasy, and Vol has built some amazing weapons in Warhammer 40k, so abso-freaking-lutely. And Vashtor, of course, has built, plenty of his own craziness. So yeah, I think you're right. Also, shit is freaking rad.
Yeah, totally. Agreed. Skylar, thank you very much, Skylar. Ross, favorite of the big four, that's a toughie. Or alternatively, which would you fall for the easiest? Nurgle, high fructose corn syrup, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch?
Okay, so this question is like, it's definitely one I've thought about. I gotta be honest with you. Different points in my life, I would have different answers. I was a soldier, actually, in part of my life. So in that section of my life, I would have said corn. Where I am right now, specifically 50-year-old Ross Watson, I would say Slaanesh would be the one I would fall for the easiest, just because sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. Hell yeah. That's all
it changes as you go through the different phases of your life, but
it does.
in the end, Slaanesh catches everyone.
Yep.
Krem Gelto, thank you very much. Searing Doom Rider. Yeah. Who needs a spaceship when you got a demon bicycle on fire? Get on, nerds. We're going to the moon.
I see we have a fellow man of culture in the audience. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thanks very much, Krem Gelto. Jack Ruby, is the Wandering Castle where Malice would live when he comes back to canon, and where would the Screaming Godchild be? The Wastes want these to be canon.
Oh, that's got to be Indy. That's got to be you, my man.
I mean, would I put Malice in the Wandering Castle? I mean, our malice or ultimately malal equivalent, if we're going over Warhammer language, I mean, you could, but I probably wouldn't. I would prefer to build something new, interesting. And one of the great mistakes of writing chaos is tying it all together too neatly with bows. Chaos is big, it's unwieldy, it is difficult, it is horrific, it is so many adjectives, but consistent isn't one that I would prefer to use. And where would the Screaming Godchild be over there? Fuck knows. The Waste want those to be canon. Yes, they do have, I mean, 40k has a bit of an issue with its warp in general because of the massive ascendancy of the Chaos Gods. And anything that sort of exists there, you do have this bit of, well, why doesn't Khorne kill it, or Slaanesh eat it, or Nurgle, corrupt it? There's always a question there.
Well, I liked what you said about them being much bigger than you imagine. That the chaos deities, especially in 40k, are, like I said, they're just beyond understanding. You can sort of dimly perceive at best their presence in the world.
I heard Gimli, as in the dwarf.
No, sorry, Gimli. Like just like I mean, to use a literary term, it's like through a glass darkly. Like we see chaos through a film, if you will, a filter that is just because we are human and we're unable to sense or even comprehend the vastness of the chaos gods. So anyway, thank you. That's all I really want to say.
Coolly. Oh, Deadman, thank you again. Speaking of surprise Carnosaur, I think you could do a Lizardman equivalent in 40k. Basically, have them be another race the old ones made, who were the first rulers post-war in heaven. Then, say, 45 million years ago, not that long ago, but pretty far, Elder and Krork rebelled, the race flees, and has now returned as the true inheritors of the old ones.
Well, Andy said it earlier. If it exists in Games Workshop, it will probably come around at some point. It's just like a question of, is there a good enough idea? Is there a need? Certainly. I love Lizardmen, as I've mentioned before. Would love to see them in 40k. I don't have that idea. I don't have that great concept of, this is how I would bring them in. So I'm just going to shrug my shoulders and say maybe.
I mean, could you do it? Yes. Should you do it? I mean, 40k is so big, you can do almost anything with it. There is ultimately billions of planets that are unexplored and could contain almost anything.
Ironically, the Jurassic Park quote, you were too busy thinking that you could, you didn't think about whether you should.
Good.
And that's perfect for Lizardmen. Perfect.
It really is. Just absolutely spot on. And the same applies to Space Skaven. Brock 6000, thanks for the great screen, gents, and thank you in return for your super chats. Been super appreciated. In what ways could players in a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game enter the realm of chaos and not be instantly killed or driven irrevocably insane? The answer is none but. And it's the but that is the source of a story. Under normal circumstances, the answer would always be, yeah, dumb be fucked. It's all gone wrong. You're in trouble. You can't exist over there. That's not a natural environment for anything that is mortal or that comes from the material realm. You are pretty much intrinsically antithetical to everything that's over there, and everything over there equally is antithetical to you. It's not going to go well. But in the end, PCs are the protagonists in their own stories, and the protagonists in their own stories are telling unique, interesting tales that break rules, that do something different, that make coming to the table worthwhile. As you go, I took on the Chaos Gods and killed them, or I went to the 40k world and rode around space in a Thunderhawk, and I used to work for Emperor Karl Franz. You can do that shit in your own individual tales, and that's okay. This doesn't need to make sense from a Games Workshop perspective, because as we said, Games Workshop, please can fuck off. They're not affecting my game at home. So the answer to this one is there any way to do it? Yes, because magic is a core component of Warhammer, and there's always a spell, there's always a ritual, there's always an artifact that allows you to do something a bit different. For example, forging reality out of chaos, because you've got yourself something that is an artifact that's particularly anti-chaotical, which means that when you move into that place, your minds can somehow survive the inherently insanity-inducing events that you encounter. So the answer is whatever you make up for your cool story.
100%.
I would suggest it. Yeah, okay, we're on to Mikhail Halsey. Did you notice Horus mentioning Queethel and his steeds during the End and the Death Part 3? Do you think there was any significance in that?
Okay, so first of all, the authors of these books, Dan Abnett specifically, loves to pick up little threads that have been left behind and mention them and weave them in little ways that he possibly can. So it doesn't shock me a bit that this is something that he did. Do I think it's significant? Only if that thread is pulled, okay? Because those threads exist. They exist to get your mind going. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, what would that mean? If someone in Games Workshop decides to pull on that thread, it could be significant. Do I think it is significant? Personally, no. Like, my answer to that is I don't. I think it was just something he threw in there to make people go, ooh, oh, that's cool. I haven't thought about that in a really long time. I don't believe it's part of any grand plan or anything like that to bring them into the setting. But
it's an Easter egg.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a word there that's dropped for fans who can pick up Quethel as the example of Chaos God creation from the old Realms of Chaos books and go, ooh, I know that name. I'm so clever. It's an Easter egg. And it doesn't mean that there's anything planned. It's not like, for example, watching Predator 2 and seeing an alien skull in the background and going, wait, what? Oh, they're in the same universe. It doesn't mean that we're going to get an Alien versus Predator movie or a Quethel versus Sanguinius movie in the future. What it means is someone dropped an Easter egg, and that Easter egg could become a thing later. It's unlikely in this particular instance because it's Quethel, for goodness sake. But nevertheless, still pretty cool.
And very cool. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, totally. Professor Shap, what would you prefer? Having a 40k Lizardman faction or a 40k Skaven faction?
Okay, so for me, and I do want to hear what Andy has to say about this. Okay, so I love Lizardman. I mentioned that. I would love to see Lizardman in 40k. I've said that. Having said that, I think 40k Skaven would be the more interesting option. I think it would make for slightly more interesting stories to bring them in. So the preference here is just, I think I could probably make more interesting stuff from a 40k faction of Skaven than I could from a 40k faction of Lizardmen. Despite the fact that I love Lizardmen, so there's that. Andy?
Yeah. I prefer Warhammer having cool shit that 40k doesn't have, and 40k having cool shit that Warhammer doesn't have.
That's a good point.
And the Skaven fucking rock. There's a reason that a lot of people go, I want Space Skaven. It's because they're so fucking cool. They're such a great creation, and there's something that is uniquely Warhammer. These are not something that feel like they've lifted another idea from another fantasy game and just ported it in. Skaven were pretty much a relatively unique Warhammer creation, made for Warhammer, first concepted for Warhammer. It's a Warhammer thing. So would I like to see it ported over to 40k? Just no. I really love Warhammer having its own unique thing. And Age of Sigmar is Warhammer's next step. So them being there makes total sense. And then doing the big Skaven invasion, yeah, rocking. But I personally would prefer neither, because I'm a sticky, grumpy old fellow who likes things being the way they are.
You know, Andy, I want to say this. I do really appreciate your passion for that setting. And I think you made a great point, because Skaven are, and I've said this, I've had conversations with friends, Skaven are unique. They're a touchstone, an absolute key part of what makes Warhammer Warhammer and what separates it from all the other fantasy settings. And by God, there are so many. So you make an excellent point about them, like that having them also in 40k would kind of remove some of that specialness.
Yeah,
good point. I think my answer stands, because like creatively, that's where I sit. But I think you made a really, really good point, and I just wanted to add on to that.
Hey, Ricky. Here we go. We told Andy about our Isekai Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign. Now you get to as well, I presume. We landed in Naggaroth, nearly lost a leg to some Umbral, and managed to kill a Dark Elf and had to eat them. A bit chewy. Managed to get Lustria and then the Old World.
Wow.
Ricky.
Yeah,
these campaigns are thoroughly mental. I really enjoy them.
Well, if the maps are analogous, then yeah, I'm sitting in Naggaroth. So
bad luck.
Naggaroth. I'm sitting somewhere in the Dark Elf land. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're in trouble. Hey, Jack Ruby, thanks very much. Any headcanon why the Soul Grinder, here we go, is in all 3 settings and not the other demon engines? Is it because they are too strong and would stomp on fantasy?
Okay, good question. In my opinion, the reason why the Soul Grinder is in all 3 is because they had a need for that type of mini, and they had that type of mini, and it was cost effective to just use that same mini. That's basically it, in my opinion. But I'd love to hear what Andy thinks about this.
Yeah, so there was a decision made for Warhammer some time ago to take away 40k tech. Mm-hmm. It used to be a core component of Warhammer. It used to be something that Warhammer had a lot of. Khorne was known for wielding things like las cannons and auto guns and stuff from 40k. Khorne's advantage was that he had tech, and the demons reflected this all the way back in Realm of Chaos. However, as the settings developed, evolved, and became their own unique things, Khorne lost this. The great demon forge of Khorne instead turned to just warrior fanaticism, crazy over-the-top frenzies, and being good in close combat. Close combat won over tech, but it used to be tech because fantasy needed to have its own shtick. Whenever a new designer came along, they would go, what can I do to make this feel fantasy and not 40k? And that's really all this is. Anything that feels 40k, they kind of just pushed to the side and went, no, we want the Warhammer equivalent. And it's one of the reasons why tech has constantly been kicked in the nads whenever it comes to the Warhammer equivalent. They've just gone, yeah, look, we're not doing that. Why? Because it's too 40k. And we don't want that to come across. So thus, we are left with this weird gaping hole in the setting where a lot of tech probably would exist, particularly when you look at the fact that Warhammer is a high science fiction setting with an old ones, with great old one tech and enormous weapons of mass destruction, which are truly extraordinary. But that's a weird fantasy sci-fi tech, not 40k style tech or even the Demon Engine style tech. So, yeah.
If I may jump out on this,
yeah,
I think from my own personal experience, I was working at Games Workshop when the Defiler, which is the original one of these, was introduced. The Defiler came out when I was working there, and it's very possible that this is just one of those artifacts of that time when the two settings were connected and were together, because that was the end of the Defiler came out at the very end of that connection period. It may just be a lingering echo of what used to be. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
And I think that's fair. So the answer is, should they be there? Probably, but they're not. So for your hammer, come up with your reasons. My hammer, LAWhammer, I actually have answers for all of this, but that's not Games Workshop's version. That's my own personal ones that we're doing in our campaigns. So for your hammer, you can figure out what works best, but there is not a definitive answer there for why tech is so freaking weird in Warhammer. Hey, Dynaman, purely out of curiosity, the Emperor has been written inconsistently. Do you prefer the version where he has arguably noble goals, but his methodology ultimately made things worse, or the version where he was actually in the right and it was just due to chaos interfering that caused it to go wrong? Personally, I significantly prefer the first.
Do I prefer, of the two options you've presented, I do prefer the first one. But again, to be clear, like the current lore is that he is a man with grand ideals, grand visions, and it's worth remembering that he thinks in terms of thousands of years, not a single year. So plans that he puts in motion that look to us like absolute horrible mistakes, maybe that means thousands of years will actually come to an end that he designed, that he wanted. I don't know. But he's profoundly flawed. It is a known and incontrovertible fact. The Emperor is profoundly flawed. So, yeah, I guess I prefer the first one for that reason.
Yeah. I would say that we're all heroes in our own story. And I think that it is fine for the Emperor to be the hero in his own story and to think and to be absolutely certain that he is right in everything that he is doing. And that he from his perspective, can happily say if it wasn't for that pesky chaos, everything would have been right all along. But pesky chaos kept on coming along and ruining his fun. So that is totally fine with both interpretations of that. And I think both can stand. He can be the person that is the last half, but in fact, he is also the person in the first half.
Good point.
Yeah. Sir Panza, in my opinion, did the old ones predict the cataclysm is the same as did God predict the betrayal of Eden? Thoughts? Interesting one as we're straying into real world religion, which we generally don't go into. So I can answer this one with a certain amount of not authority. So, did God predict the betrayal in Eden? The answer is very clear in the Bible, and the answer is he did not. Because the original stories are very different to what came later. The original stories are pitched with a God that was part of a pantheon of gods, not the only God, and he was flawed in a variety of ways. The later stories of the Bible are completely different, where God has taken on this supreme position and moved from just being a local deity of the Jews to being the God of all gods. So the later God would not have made that particular error. This, however, is not commonly the position of most evangelical Christians, at least, who believe in the univocality of the Bible throughout. This, however, is not the truth. In at least the simplest ways that any biblical scholar will sit down and go, I've studied it, is clearly not the truth. But people who want it to be the truth and have faith that it's the truth will very much go in that direction. So loosely speaking, the question on the Eden side is relatively simple to answer. And the same is the case with the old ones in predicting the cataclysm. The old ones, if we go with the old world lore, and if we go with Age of Sigmar, predicted the cataclysm and wanted it to happen. It's as simple as that. It's not a question that doesn't have an answer. It has an answer. But that does not chime very well with many people who want the old ones to be this unknowing force, who have made mistakes for things to not be that simple. So they want the old ones to be different. The same can be laid down, and you're correct. They are similar questions. Okay, the same can be laid down on the other side, where people don't want God to have a flaw, don't want God to not know everything. That doesn't make sense because of what God has become in other parts of books. So this is an uncomfortable question in that it strays into real world stuff. But you know me, I'll just dive in with both feet. I'm in Scotland. I'm far away from getting hopefully torched tomorrow. But having said that, I do live next door to a mosque.
I admire that answer, Andy. I think you did that very well.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that and move on swiftly. Chris, I know how much you love Mass Effect, Andy. Totally true. I do. I adore Mass Effect, but for all of its flaws, and I am happy to discuss its flaws all day. But how much do you too like the Dragon Age setting?
Okay, first of all, I didn't know you were a Mass Effect fan.
I am.
So to me, Mass Effect is like the holy grail of role-playing games. Like, I would love to do a Mass Effect role-playing.
Just let's put it online right now. If it ever comes out and either of us get it, hire the other. I'm shaking your hand right now.
150%, yes.
Yeah, here we go. Shaking
hands. Yeah. I'm an enormous Mass Effect guy. Dragon Age, though, I love Dragon Age. Thedas, of course, the setting for Dragon Age, famously is you know why that's called Thedas is because it was the Dragon Age setting, and they made the classic error of using a placeholder that eventually became the actual name. So Thedas is very cool. I am a fan of Thedas. I think Thedas is really interesting. I would very much like to do something with it someday. Who knows? It would be really, really fun. It's a cool place, like the Grey Wardens. I love the dwarven realm. Orzammar.
Orzammar is the big city.
Yeah, Orzammar is so cool. Big fan. So yeah, absolutely. I could go on and on. I'll stop there.
So Chris, I could also go on, and I will also stop there. I have played all the games to death. I have strong opinions about Dragon Age because it's gone through different hands and has come out with very different answers to the same problem more than once. Let's not get into just how differently our bad guys are portrayed in each one of the different games, where they get completely redone. Our Genlock Alpha becomes a completely different figure, then a completely different figure again, as each one of them have gone with their own vision. I was originally going to be working on the Dragon Age RPG, but my house got flooded. Pretty much. I had all of the stuff from EA that had been sent to me.
Oh my God.
BioWare. I'd got all of the background stuff. And by the way, it was amazing. And everything that happened in the second game was already hard coded into what was being created for the first game. Just bloody brilliant. The amount of work that they had done in the world building was deep, extensive, and what I thought worthwhile. I was really looking forward to working on it. Then my house got flooded and it all went wrong. So I didn't do that. So I did a few maps for them because that was something I could do on my laptop. But I was in a very bad place at that point, having been, chucked out of my own house because of a sewage flood. It was the worst. So I love the setting dearly, and I'm very pleased that Dragon Age got its own game. I really wish that Mass Effect had also got one. It almost certainly wouldn't be the game I'd want because I've got very strong opinions as to what Mass Effect could be as a game, but nevertheless, I would have played it to freaking death. Hey, David Whitfield, thank you very much again. Appreciated. Could Chaos Undivided represent pure chaos where there is no form or thought? The expansion of pure chaos is driving the chaos gods into the realm of reality as they try to survive this expansion.
The short version for 40K is that Chaos Undivided is really just a construct in 40K. It's just kind of like an idea that some people have that chaos is is this group of 4 guys who sit around and make decisions. They're not. That is not how 40K works for Chaos Gods. So the Chaos Undivided in 40K would never be a thing because there's no force or will behind it. But that may be different. I would love to hear what Andy has to say in Warhammer.
We've discussed Chaos Undivided a lot. In particular, David, if you remember when we were discussing it in the Chaos Gods stream, and we didn't include Chaos Undivided as one of the Chaos Gods, even though it is almost used like a god in some of the various books and background books, because it kind of isn't. It's basically just shit, we need a Chaos army. And we need someone to lead them, and it's not the Ever-Chosen. And how do we do that? He's got the mark of Chaos Undivided. That's it. Yeah, that's a thing. And it was a construct, actually, as was said there, often to facilitate army construction in particular, rather than representing anything that was really going on in the setting. So, in your question here, could it represent pure chaos? And that's something that I think has always been rather amusing, that the Chaos Gods of Warhammer aren't chaos, small c, at all. They are particularly fixed in their views. They are very formal, almost, in comparison to what pure small c chaos would be. Particularly if you compare with, say, how chaos is often represented in, say, the Murkokian side of things over to how they are represented in Games Workshop. But they're not really gods of chaos. They're gods of destruction or excess, really, who go far too far in what it is that they are individually focused upon. Because, as was neatly explained, they're not really things with minds. They are forces of nature. They're just much bigger than just simple anthropomorphized gods. So could you do this? I mean, you could, but I'm not sure what the story would be. And ultimately, that's what I'd be looking to do. What's the story I'm trying to tell? What's the great metaphor that I'm pulling on here to actually make this a thing? And the answer to this is, it feels like it would be being done for the sake of being done, rather than being done because it brings something great to the setting. Personally, as is often going to have to be added to literally every single answer, personally. Mikhail Halsey, although clearly Murkokian in origin, hey, Michael Murkock, do the Chaos Gods have heavy Lovecraftian elements also?
Short answer, yes. So 40K specifically draws from so many sources of fandom, of lore, of literature. Yes, absolutely. There are heavy Lovecraftian elements in the 40K versions of these gods. You look at all the tentacles for Tzeentch and Slaanesh. Just look at them. There's so many tentacles that they absolutely have some Lovecraftian elements. I know that's reductive. I apologize, but in the if you are a fan of the Cthulhu mythos, you will find aspects that are represented with the Chaos Gods. Absolutely, 100%.
My answer's shorter. Yes. Firesnake 905, random Malal realm idea. Just a giant, constantly moving asteroid dodgeball. Constantly moving and slamming into the other realms. Screw you guys! Take that! Dodge this!
I can see that in my mind right now, actually. That's wild.
That was an evocative image. Gigawins! If either of you were tasked with designing the 40k version of Wood Elves using the Elder Exodites as a starting point, which is the obvious starting point, because the Exodites basically are kind of the Wood Elves of 40k. They're not, but they kind of are. What would they look like?
Okay, so you've touched on one of the most mysterious aspects of 40k. There are several things we could talk about and say, okay, I can say this with authority. I know all about it and all about this and all about that. Exodites are one of those things that Games Workshop has only very lightly touched on in just a few. The amount of material we know as a fact about Exodites is incredibly small. We know they have world spirits, that they're, you know, like a craft world has a spirit within it. Like for the craft world, that's the circuit that contains all of their souls. The Exodites have something like that for their home planet, where their home planet is built around, or is how do I put this? There is a structure in the planet that contains a version of that. That's one of the things we know. Is that analogous to something like Alpha Lauren, or maybe a little? Yeah, kind of, sort of. What would they look? I mean, specifically, what would they look like? That, I mean, honestly, I couldn't even begin to tell you what they look like beyond some, like, maybe some Jess Goodwin sketches or some John Blanche, scribbles that kind of sort of resemble an elf. There's an idea out there of what an Exodite looks like. We know they like to use lances and they ride upon dragons, which may or may not be dinosaurs. Beyond that, I mean, the possibilities are endless. This is one of those things where I could sit here and wish list and dream all kinds of things that I would see in Exodites of the Eldar, and I'm sure a lot of what Andy knows about the gods of the Aesir, for example, would probably be relevant. There's probably some version of Alariel. I don't know. Like, it's fascinating and certainly worth an entire show probably talking about it, but that's the best I can do right now. Andy?
Yeah, so Exodites. They kind of are the Wood Elves of the 40k universe. I mean, kind of, but it's a real strong kind of. They are the ones on the outside of the whole, doing their own thing, attached to spirits. And the more that you use generalized terms along those lines, you could definitely go, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I see where you're coming from. In some respects, you can almost see the origin of it when someone went, so what are Wood Elves in 40k? Right. Okay, cool. Okay, let's do some Exodite Knights and let's do some, particularly when we look back at their origins back in the old Space Marine game when they were doing some of the bits for Epic. And loosely, I would want Jez Goodwin, who I believe has recently retired from Games Workshop, which sort of makes me sad. I guess because
the impact of Jess's art is
in particular his concepts for miniatures. He concepted the Space Marines, the Eldar, the Skaven. He did so much that to me is just everything. I would want him.
Yeah. Visual definition is just
his view of what are effectively some sort of native version of the Eldar who are still living in a way that is to them pre-cataclysmic Slanesh horror values that reject much of what the Eldar had become near the end before the fall. And I would be looking for 10,000 years, which in Eldar terms is not much, but 10,000 years worth of development post then. So I would be looking for perhaps an Eldar design that was speaking to something older amongst the Eldar, speaking to something that's very much not the craft world and sealing themselves away from everything that they once were, but in some respects rejecting that Eldar have to be what the craft worlds have become. And in some respects, that's kind of what the Wood Elves are doing as well when they're staying in contact with nature. They're staying in contact with the spirits, and they become something different. And I think that's ultimately what I'd be looking to bring forward. What's the something different? And the something different is to protect themselves from Slanesh, from She Who Thirsts, to protect themselves from the fall. They have tied themselves more closely to the world spirits. And that has changed them. And I'd want that reflected in their design. What does that change mean? Is it something that is present upon them physically? And the answer is yes, because in the end, we want cool minis that look different. Okay, so something that does that and makes you go, holy shit, yeah, I see what that is. And that's what Jez's job would be. Here's some loose ideas, turn it into something cool.
Andy, what you just said was beautiful. I mean, that was literally beautiful, and I loved it. 100%.
Just my tie here. And I think you're beautiful too, Ross. Because apparently you're my American twin, so you must be. Mikhail Halsey, thank you very much again. How do we make a distinction of the Chaos Gods being unknowable, but also understanding how to worship them, ascend into Demon Prince, or gain gifts and boons from them? Ooh.
So in 40K, this is actually a very interesting thing. Yes, people do worship the Chaos Gods. They do ascend to Demon Princehood. They do gain gifts and boons. But the way it works in 40K is a lot like a drug addiction. You can imagine the rush you get from a drug. Like, I don't know, let's just say heroin, for example. I've never taken heroin, but I'm gonna use it as the example. If you were a user of heroin and you were like, man, this thing gives me a hell of a high, I'm just going to keep doing it. That's kind of like worship. And on top of that, at some point, you don't know when, but at some point that is going to change you. Like the using of the drug is going to change you. You're going to become a different person. Your priorities are going to shift. Your values are going to shift because of that addiction to what you're getting from the drug. Imagine the Chaos Gods as heroin. Okay, and worshiping them is like using the drug, and turning into a demon prince is like the addiction, and like the gifts and boons are just like the things you find that are different about you, the things that have changed in you because of your connection to this corruptive source. It's not like there's a menu and you order at the restaurant and say, oh yes, I would like this, and this, and then I become a demon prince. There's no checklist to follow. There's no there is the idea of the path of glory, which I think is also that's a Warhammer thing that is connective to the. There's the idea of the path of glory that eventually I will ascend to demonhood if I am sufficiently worshipful. But that's in 40K. That's a lie. That is completely untrue. It is not. It is not guaranteed. It is never guaranteed. Yeah. Chaos is a corruptive force. It infects you. It changes you. It alters your values and your perceptions. So, yes, the Chaos Gods in 40K are very much unknowable. There are cultural understandings of how to worship them. There are cultural. There is cults and groups and even entire legions of space marines that have fallen to the worship of the ruinous powers, and they believe that they understand what they need to do to get those gifts and those boons and to transition into demon princehood, but they don't. They just think that they do.
Yeah, hard agree. I will add that there is a host of there's a host of knowns. Now, that doesn't mean they're real, but there is a lot of them. And they are, in many respects, reinforced by the whispering voices from beyond, who are all whispering, let's be honest, whatever it's required to get whatever it is that they want, and even that is unknowable. The demons who are whispering away saying, do this and you'll be rewarded, do that and you'll be rewarded, a lot of that's just lies, falsehood to get whatever they want. But a lot of it, because they're demons, are entirely through the lens of they are incapable of doing anything else. They are almost forces of nature themselves. They want that huge bloodlust, so they're trying to fuel that direction. They don't care what the mortals think or how they worship or do anything else. They just want the bloodshed to occur, for change to happen, for disease to spread. And the great lie of chaos is exactly the same as the great lie of capitalism in many respects.
Capitalism is the fifth chaos god.
Yeah, capitalism really gives the American dream version of reality, where anyone can be a multi-billionaire, but they aren't. Hardly any are, and they hold on to it jealously. And somewhat similarly with chaos, anyone could become a demon prince, but just like with money, a lot of it involves luck. A lot of it involves just random occurrence and has nothing to do with some external power giving it to you, unless it happens to be your parents handing you a lot of money for you to squander on some business venture. And somewhat similarly, you tend to find a lot of chaos also works in this weird, almost nepotistic fashion, where those who are sort of in the know gain benefit in a variety of interesting ways. And they spread the falsehood of capitalism, I mean chaos, and how anyone could possibly be a demon prince. So the answer is that they all claim that it's knowable, where the truth behind it all is that it's this amorphous nothing that has nothing but caprice, that doesn't have the genuine anthropomorphized views that everyone sort of imposes upon it, because they want to understand humanity's condition held in this cause-effect world is to try to understand, but they're trying to understand the unknowable, the impossible. The realm of chaos is literally beyond mortal comprehension. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they don't try.
In 40K, one of the terms used to describe the chaos powers is the primordial truth, which is absolutely what they want you to think. They want you to believe that they have all the answers.
That's beautiful. And yes, agreed. Hey, Skylar, God Emperor. And I would have gotten away with it too. Without you blasted meddling chaos gods. And your talking dog. Totally correct, Skylar. Love it. Hey, Ricky, we've also done an Isekai in 40K. Very few things turn pants brown like a gene stealer hunting you in the dark tunnels under Terra. With a sharp piece of metal as a weapon, we killed by dropping 309 pounds on it from 4 stories up.
Well done.
Yep, good. 309 pounds might not do a gene stealer in, though. I mean, that's quite a lot of weight, but it's not that much weight.
Let's put it this way.
Their kindness carapace could survive that.
Let's put it this way. Gene stealers are known to tear apart Terminator armor and kill Space Marines inside Terminator armor. Caiaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium, one of the greatest and strongest guys in the setting, is horribly afraid of pure straight gene stealers. He's like, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with those guys.
I remember a conversation. I can't remember who it was. It was back when I was in workshop. But basically, how big is a gene stealer was the conversation, and the horrible realization that almost all of our renditions of them were beside Space Marines, and just how big they were, just how truly terrifying the gene stealers were. And yeah, they tear through Terminator armor like it's made of paper. So yeah, they're freaking terrifying creatures. I'm now shaking in my boots. Hey, Mikhail Halsey, thank you again. In Godblight, Rotigus mentions that the Chaos Gods are bored of the 41st millennium and are focusing on other universes. It makes me wonder what other settings there could be besides the big 3.
I mean, that is a fascinating question. So Workshop tends to treat things that seem like they're connected as separate universes. A good example is Necromunda to 40K. Necromunda technically exists within 40K, but it is its own separate IP. For example, Space Hulk is its own separate IP from 40K. That being said, I think what you're really looking about is you're talking about, like, what would be, where would these chaos gods exist outside of the major 3 settings that would be really interesting, and like what would that what would that look like? And I the answer I have here, I think, is it comes from my own, labyrinthian mind. So please take it with a giant grain of salt. Like, I don't know if this is half as cool as I think it would be. But in my opinion,
I'm listening now.
But in my opinion, I think one of the coolest ways to bring in the Chaos Gods into a different type of setting would be something cyberpunk. I would love to see some neon-soaked streets and have to worry about a Slanesh or Nurgle or Khorne, or Tzeentch. Like that to me, I think would be really fascinating, would be to see how that is applied in a different genre with different tropes.
Yeah. If you go into Age of Sigmar, there's a lovely little bit there about Archaon, the great destroyer of the Warhammer world. Screw that guy. And Archaon is described as having gone across basically the universes and destroyed them too. The Warhammer world is just one amongst many, and it's the one that he came from. And he has been elsewhere doing basically this. And loosely, the answer is as wide as you can imagine. If we're talking a different question as to what would make for a really cool new IP, agreed. And Necromunda, to a degree, is attempting to fulfill that role with its almost cyberpunk-esque view, particularly if you look at, say, the Escher and how they present themselves, or the ridiculously overwrought Goliaths. There is definitely a tone of it there, but yeah, I think that would be pretty neat. I remember as well doing a Warhammer 4K game, which was basically what happens to Warhammer about 1,000 years in the future. Because the timeline in Warhammer Fantasy is generally always presented with the Empire's timeline, and the Empire's timeline blows up around about 25, 20, 30, depending on which date you prefer. So taking that another 1,500 years in the future, that makes for an interesting world. And what would happen in a world where magic is real and Warhammer is extended for an extra bit of time into its future? That could be cool.
Warhammer Shadowrun.
Yeah, exactly. That could be super cool. Oh, that Shadowrun. Played that a good bit as a kid. Hey, Skylar Martin, God Emperor. I've already said that one. I've already said the next one too. Why have my comments suddenly scrolled backwards? Excuse me while I just quickly
Time is meaningless.
Ourselves. Yeah, it is. It's
the warp.
It's the realm of chaos. Okay, right. So, yeah, David Whitfield said, yes, I remember our discussion concerning. Oh, David, that was concerning, I presume, Chaos Undivided. Yes, it was Chaos Undivided. Just wanted a 40k perspective on that. Can you give a lore, not Games Workshop, explanation for the survival of Chaos Space Marines over millennium of losses?
Absolutely, I totally can. So here's the thing. What we know about making Space Marines comes from the Imperium. Again, it's that viewpoint we always get is from the Imperium of Man. And the Imperium of Man is like, well, it's really dangerous and really hard and really time consuming, and we only want the best. We want the best of the best of the best. We want the guys who survived all the difficult trials, and we're just gonna give that guy, the special guy who made it all the way through his initiation, he gets to be a Space Marine, nobody else. The legions that betrayed the Emperor, they do not give a crap about all that material. They're like, they will land on a planet and say, you, and you, get on the ship. You're all going to become Chaos Space Marines. And their guys are like, really? Yes, you are, because they're going to shoot you if you don't. The Chaos Space Marines, they use shortcuts. They are fine with things that are tech heresy in the Imperium, like cloning. They are fine with genetic manipulation. There's a guy called Fabius Bile. You may have heard of him. He's actually from the heresy era. And even back then, he was like, Space Marines could actually be a lot better if we just kind of ditched all these rules about not including, alien DNA. So yeah, Fabius
or women.
So listen, if Fabius Bile is your role model, and he is absolutely for tons of little chaos war bands of Space Marines, yeah, they're just going to use their gene seed in anybody they can grab. So the survival makes a hell of a lot of sense if you think about it, because those guys they just don't care. They'll just grab anybody and zip them up. Also, the second thing I should mention here: survival of Chaos Marines over a millennium of losses. Okay, during the Horus Heresy era, the Great Crusade through the Horus Heresy, Space Marine legions were hundreds of thousands strong.
Yeah.
The Ultramarines had one of the largest legions pre-Heresy. They were like 250,000 Space Marines. And I mean, that's even just an estimate. That's not, we don't even know, right? So if you had hundreds of thousands of Space Marines, let's just say that, you know, the Black Legion, which is what became of a lot of the Traitor Legions after the Scouring, those guys, if you assume that there's 200,000 of them, which there certainly could be because they come from multiple legions, and the Sons of Horus weren't a small legion either, then yeah, they can suffer losses and still be around. They can suffer losses that would destroy entire chapters of Space Marines and still be around. Not to mention all the replacements and things that they get over time. And lastly, remember, the warp makes time weird. So what may seem like a millennium of losses to us, maybe the Black Legion has only been fighting, you know, from their perspective for like, you know, a couple centuries. There's a lot of possible reasons why the Chaos Legions remain a threat and remain large, even after they've lost and lost and lost and lost. But sometimes they win. So there you go.
Yeah, that's basically my answer too. Yeah, legions. They are not chapters.
They're enormous.
And they don't obey the rules. They've got their own rules. Having said that, they've got their own cultures and multiple cultures at that, because they've got lots of different foundation points now. Individuals who have led off their own versions. You can make almost any story with the Chaos Space Marines these days. So yeah, I don't think this is a particularly large problem that's difficult to get over. Hey, Ricky Chapman, thank you again. We interpreted the Chaos Gods being born in each setting is them finally showing up like friends, heading to a game store and playing a game. Khorne shows up first to get the game set up, then Nurgle, Tzeentch, and then Slaanesh.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah, that amuses me deeply. Although if we go with the most recent iterations of the Demons of Chaos book, it would be Tzeentch second and Nurgle third. Although Nurgle often waxes in power, significantly more powerful than any of the other Chaos Gods when disease is particularly rife in the mortal realms.
I would love to see someone do like a webcomic of the Chaos Gods
sitting down playing their games,
and it's just like a board game. You know, it's literally like, okay, I'm gonna put my meeple in the Empire. You know?
Did you ever play Chaos in the Old World?
I play tested Chaos in the Old World.
Well, there you go.
My name's in the rule book, sir.
Yeah, I like to hear Chaos in the Old World is basically that. Mornington Crescent. One thing I find telling is that every Primarch who fell to Chaos became a Demon Prince, save Horus, who died. Was it that they were strong enough to contain the power of the warp, or something more, bar the this is coolest side?
Okay, so to be clear, Horus kind of did become a Demon Prince. Horus Ascended is the term we use for him when he's flushed with the power of Chaos, when he's fighting the Emperor on board the Vengeful Spirit near the end there. He was, you know, easily at least as strong, if not stronger. So why do the Traitor Primarchs become Demon Princes? So first of all, it's not fully confirmed that all of them have become Demon Princes, but we have seen several of them for sure. And for Perturabo's case, I mean, he really definitely did not want that, but that's kind of just, you know, price to doing business. So was it that they were strong enough to contain the power of the warp, or something more? It's actually kind of both. So first of all, Primarchs are demigods. They are insanely strong, tough, powerful. Fulgrim could destroy an avatar of Cain single-handedly. These guys were serious business. They were demigods. If you're talking about power scales, Primarchs are sitting very close to the very top. But something more is also true. The Primarchs were not just creations of science. The Primarchs and the Primarch Project involved the Emperor channeling, stealing power from the Chaos Gods, is the way from their perspective, he was stealing their power. But it definitely comes from and through the warp, which connects, like the subject of our show, connects everything, including all of the Chaos Gods. So the fact that they were built, the Primarchs were actually born from a combination of science and the warp. It makes them uniquely suited to becoming a Demon Prince if they if they align themselves too closely or become too swollen with power from the warp, they certainly can end up that way. A lot of people would argue that Magnus the Red and Sanguinius, because of the way that they existed pre-heresy, had far stronger connections to the warp than any other Primarch. But all of the Primarchs did. Even Perturabo, who was just like, and Mortarion. Oh God, Mortarion is hates himself, which is him and Perturabo are having a hating themselves competition, frankly, at the moment. Mortarion hates himself because he's become a demon prince, because he never wanted that. Perturabo never wanted that, but that's who they are. That's what they've become. So yeah, it's kind of both.
Yeah. I think it can be easily summed up in a slightly different way, which is they kind of already were. And and by that I mean they have gained access to a source of power that is different. And they could be argued, and I've seen this argument, that they rubbish the idea that the Chaos Gods don't have selective power. Because they were all elevated as demon princes, which means someone did or whatever. Nah, they were kind of always on that direction unless they were somehow stopped. Because they fell.
So one of the Primarchs who did not become a demon prince was on that path. That would be Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz was going to become, he was going that way, and he was going that way from day one. So he didn't get there because he died. He died before he got there. But yeah, certainly some of the Primarchs were on that trajectory. I think that's definitely sure. I like where you're coming from, where you say they already were, because like
already were. It's kind of where they're gonna go, even if they don't want to.
There's something there. There's definitely something there, and I think it's fair to say that a Primarch as a being exists in sort of that liminal space between the real world and the Empyrean. To an extent, some of them do not. Like, for example, Corax. Corvus Corax had this weird ability to make himself essentially invisible. Like he would just stealth. That's supernatural stealth. That is not like a super skill. It's not like he's Batman. He could just do that. Conrad Kurz could see the future. These guys all had weird supernatural abilities that are part and parcel of who they are. So to a degree, when you say they already were, yeah, sort of. But there are some Primarchs who would have never, like some were already going that way, and there were some who were going the other way. Sanguinius, for everything we know about him, abhorred the idea. There's a point, I forget the name of the battle, but it's where the demons first appeared in the Horus Heresy era, and they tried to recruit him. They were like, "Hey, you Sanguinius, you're already not quite a person. You have wings. Yeah, you're definitely not a normal guy. You should join us." And Sanguinius was like, "Hell no! Not only no, hell no." And I oppose everything you stand for. So there were some Primarchs who were definitely going the other direction, and that's all I wanted to point out. But really, really good. I like what you had to say there.
I love mixing it up a little bit. Hey, I missed one. No, I didn't. Fire Snake 905. Ricky's Gene Stealer comment, and an addendum to that. A hive tyrant survived several buildings being dropped on it and falling into a chasm and then walked it off. Yeah, hive tyrants, though. They're not quite the same as a pure strain gene stealer, but yeah.
Orders of magnitude stronger.
yeah. Quite a bit there. Sorcerer's Friend, what is one niche alien species that you wish got more focus, maybe even an army in 40k? We kind of answered this before, but let's go for maybe that you'd like to see an entire army for. Slightly different route.
An entire army. Actually, okay, so they're kind of already on their way, but the Kroot, as part of the Tau, they have several different types of Kroot, and they eat other creatures and incorporate that stuff into their DNA. So you could have a full army of nothing but Kroot that are representative of the things that they've devoured as their lives go on, and the next generation is born with those traits. They have their own ships, the Kroot spheres, that are piloted by a Kroot hawk, which we know very little about, which I would love to know more about. So yeah, I would say the Kroot would be the one I would love to see. They're obviously already present, and I think you can sort of kind of field an army, or at least you could in other previous editions of the game. You could just have like a Kroot army, but they don't exist as a full army on their own, and I think it'd be really neat to see them that way.
Nice one. Mikhail Halsey, hypothetically, can chaos corrupt anything? Listen,
no.
Elves, Eldari, Custodes.
Okay, no. The answer is no. Chaos can corrupt a lot of things, and Andy could probably speak to this in much greater knowledge than I. But my understanding is that in the Warhammer worlds, elves do not get physically corrupted by chaos. They never become mutants. They just get like weird in the head.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. On the 40K side, we have never seen corrupted Eldari aside from like the weird stuff that the body doctors get up to down in Cormorag with the Drukhari. Custodes categorically cannot be corrupted by chaos. And in the lore, the Grey Knights have never are completely immune as well from being corrupted by chaos. We like there are some things that are kind of like you're not sure. Like, can orcs be corrupted? Maybe, we're not sure. We've never seen any. It's never been shown. Can Tyranids be corrupted? Maybe, we don't know. It's never been shown.
And like they care.
Right, like Tau and Necrons. I don't know is the answer. I don't think so with Necrons because of the way their souls are incorporated with their technology. So chaos can corrupt a lot of things, almost everything, but not quite. And there are definitely some things that you've listed and other things in the setting that cannot be corrupted by chaos, at least in 40K. Let's talk about Warhammer though.
Okay, so in Warhammer, the answer is twofold, because the word corrupt can be more than one thing. So on one side is mutate, as in you've been exposed to the powers of chaos and you become something different. And then on the other side, you have fall, as in you become chaos corrupted to the point that you fall to chaos and you no longer have your views that you had before. And when it comes to mutate, the answer for this one is pretty simple. There's lots of things that chaos finds very difficult to change. The elves are a perfect example of that. Elves, by the most modern contrivance of the lore, never mutate. Dakala be damned. Dakala, for those of you who don't know, is a mutant elf. Let's not think about it too much. She comes from a previous edition and Total War ported her in. But there could be good reasons for that, because I can give you another mutant elf. You ready? Ariel. Now, she's mutant for a different reason, but she's a mutant. She is not an elf anymore. Okay, Orion. There are lots of examples in the lore of elves who have become something different. So Dakala doesn't need to be what we understand as mutant. And indeed, when it comes to elves, they appear to have a very clean set of rules, which is they don't fall to chaos unless they choose to. They don't corrupt, but some of them do fall. We have the Anointed of Slaanesh, for example, who are Slaanesh worshipping elves, and none of them are mutants, but they are different. And the differences that they have are almost purely self-made, like they self-actualize themselves into their current form, nothing to do with chaos changing them. So can chaos corrupt anything physically, everything physically? The answer is definitely not. And there's almost certainly other examples. Slann, for example, the Slann Mage Priests, they ain't changing at all. But the other question is, can everything fall to chaos? Now, that's a different thing. And I think categorically on the fantasy side, there is only a single thing that can, by the very nature of the way the system and everything has been worked, never fall to chaos. And that's the Slann. They don't fall. They are perfect in what they are. Does that mean that they can't make mistakes? Definitely not. Does that mean that they can't do other things that could look like falling? Well, of course they can. But can they fall to chaos? The answer is pretty categorically no. This was actually a core component of an entire campaign that was going to be written for Warhammer about what can and what can't fall, which I was going to write with Gav Thorpe just before I resigned. So that campaign never happened. Pass of the Old Ones was what it was going to be called. And it was all about what does falling mean, ultimately. And the question being posed here, can chaos corrupt anything? And the answer that Gav and I had come up with was no, but. And also, yes, but. And it was because it's a story, and you're telling the story of the instance that shows that all rules, when chaos impact them, can be broken. And that's half the fun of these things.
Actually thinking back to what you said about the Primarchs and the Demon Prince stuff, it's quite possible that the Custodes are already corrupted by a warp entity, that being the Emperor. And therefore,
that's the juicy stuff I love.
Right? Like, yeah. So if you look at it from a non-Imperium perspective, the Custodes are clearly not human. They are clearly changed. They're different. And they are changed in a way because of their relationship. It's not just science, remember. Custodes are the
realm of chaos.
Right. The warp is definitely, like, in terms of Primarchs and Custodes, like that, they're far closer to it than a typical Space Marine, and certainly closer to it than a person. So it's if you want to look at it from that perspective, the Custodes have been changed. The Grey Knights, maybe that their connection to the Emperor, maybe that's one of the reasons why the warp doesn't touch them the way that it does other people, but it still means they're touched by it. Just in they're changed. Just through the lens of the Emperor rather than through the lens of the Chaos Gods. Anyway.
Changed by the Imperial cult. There we go. Love it. Love it loads. Cole Patterson, Chaos Gods in the Old West. I done shot a bloodletter.
Old West is a genre that has not been, it's underrepresented. It's true.
Wow. Cowboys versus aliens, cowboys versus bloodletters. I love it. Yeah, no, love that. Love it. Watchdog 3079. What are your thoughts on Nurgle's imprisonment of Isha and how it possibly could be resolved?
So this is, here's a question, like, legitimately, I'm not aware of this in Warhammer. Is that a thing in the Warhammer side?
It depends who you talk to. It's one of those classic portovers. The Elder Gods were ported from Warhammer into 40k, and they built a whole bunch of stories in 40k. Many of which got ported straight back into Warhammer again. And there was this weird cross-contamination going on where all of the stories by the writers were sort of assumed to be true. And they would often just drop them in as little small hints here or there, as in, oh yeah, these 40k stories, they're also happening in Warhammer. So the answer to this one is it depends on who's doing the writing. And I have had, how can I best phrase this without calling people out? I have had a very in-depth conversation with people who had very different views on this in Games Workshop, where on one side they were saying the 40k stories are for 40k only, and the other side they're saying no, they are universal constants throughout the realm of chaos. Effectively, the stories of the gods are universal, and the wipeout of the gods in 40k hasn't happened in Warhammer. That's the only difference. But all the myths are still there, and Isha being trapped by Nurgle should be a thing. And on the other side, from pretty much two people who were both in charge of saying yes or no to it, was the exact opposite. No, this isn't the case. And then there's me sitting on the outside going, right, so what do I do? And as was often the case, because you can use in-character voices and you don't need to use the God voice where it says this is the case, you can have your cake and eat it, where you can say, oh, there's myths for all of this without necessarily saying, and it's true. Warhammer, as the battle game, tended, particularly when we move into the end times, tended to very much categorically state, this god's doing this over here, and having a laugh, and this god's doing this, woohoo, this god's died, oh no! Where when you're dealing with individuals in the setting, they can have any individual story as to what they believe, but it doesn't mean it's true, which is ultimately the best answer for this. What are the best ways to resolve it? Have it be a story in the setting. Is it true or not? Does it actually matter if everyone believes it?
So I think it's a lovely story element. It certainly drives a lot of interest. And here's the thing that's great about 40K is that a lot of times there'll be a story element that people will latch onto and say, oh, that's really interesting. I want to know more. And then as time goes on, people will dig into that either in the novels or in the story of the rule books. A good example of this, back in 2018, we had Robute Guilliman woke up. He got healed by the intervention of the Saint Celestine and the Ivrain and all that, and that was amazing because to me, someone who came into the hobby 18 years before that, 19 years before that, it had been true for almost 2 decades that Guilliman was in a stasis field. He was never coming out, and they changed that. And I have a feeling that anytime you talk about something that you're like, oh, that's a really interesting part of the story, you're not alone. I have a feeling that it's certainly possible that someone at Workshop might be like, hey, you know what? Let's pull on that thread. Let's see where that goes and create something new and interesting for the Eldar. Usually what happens is someone in the studio will have a really great idea, and they'll try to find a way to bring it into the setting using prior existing lore to justify it. And it's entirely possible that it could be resolved at some point in the future. I'd love to see what happens. So you're quiet, Andy. I can't hear you.
Totally agreed. Yeah, that didn't come through. I was tapping away on a keyboard saying, yeah, everything is brilliant. And then suddenly, poof, messed up entirely by keeping myself on mute. Alrighty, moving down to Skylar Martin. Thoughts on Blood Bowl and the strongest god, Nuffle?
Of course, Nuffle. Of course. I love Blood Bowl.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love Blood Bowl. Haven't played nearly enough of it. Nuffle is hilarious. He's a great part of that. It is one of the aspects of the hobby I know the least about, unfortunately.
So, Nuffle is great. What else can we say? Really? And is very much a Blood Bowl creation that deserves to stay in Blood Bowl. Stop trying to port it over into Warhammer. I get so many people trying to do that. Nope! If you want to play a big sports game over in the Warhammer world, you've got Midden Ball. It isn't Blood Bowl, but I created a full set of Midden Ball rules using a Blood Bowl pitch with Blood Bowl field stuff. It was super fun. So there's already a game that you can do that's over in Warhammer, but you're not going to have orcs facing off against humans. I mean, that's not really how Warhammer typically works. Right, so where are we now? Prince Teclis. Lorebeards is too captivating. That's our job. Was listening to one with family while painting minis. He was so engrossed in listening, watching him take a drink out of the glass. We were cleaning our brushes.
No! I'm so sorry. I am
so many times I've been sitting with a drink of some sort, painting miniatures, and picked up the wrong cup. It is a perennial issue for us painters. It kind of happens. We can't help ourselves. It's just the way that it is. But I'm rather amused that it happened to somebody else.
And I'm glad that you were distracted by us instead of something.
Can't go wrong with that. Hey, Ricky Chapman, we should specify the weight hit Gene Stealer on head, breaking its spine, and then we shift it 47 times.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Take that, Mikael Halsey for 40k. Would you say the Grey Knight meeting Slanesh in their palace, or the Custodes being overwhelmed by Horus power and attacking the Emperor are different from outright chaos corruption?
Absolutely. So chaos is a force that can create illusions. It can change your perspective. It can change your perceptions. If the Custodes attack the Emperor because Horus desired it, yes, that is something that could happen. Does that mean that they are corrupted by chaos? Only in their own minds, like we have failed to protect our Emperor by attacking him. That's probably going to linger. That's going to be something that's going to really dwell on them. Are they going to suddenly break out in mutations? No, definitely not. The Grey Knight, same thing. Meeting Slanesh in the palace, I mean, that's kind of a Kaldor Drago move, frankly. Just like, hey, guess what? I'm here. Yeah, there's a difference between experiencing chaos or even succumbing to some of their abilities or powers and becoming a mutant or becoming a worshiper or becoming a cultist or finding that its power has wound its way into your very soul. Those are very different things.
Okay, Jack Ruby. Hi again, Jack. What kind of personality traits would fall to Nurgle? From the lore, people who only fall to Nurgle, I'm gonna I'm going to pause here and say I disagree before I continue on. But now I've said that, just to make sure that anyone listening, I do not approve of the following message. Only fall to Nurgle, usually if they become sick. Should Tzeentch be the god of healing so he doesn't let so many fall to Nurgle?
No.
So I got a couple of just loose points where I'll let Ross go wild. First, Tzeentch is not someone who makes decisions as to what is the best outcome. Tzeentch just is. He's not a god of healing. Tzeentch is a god of change, and he just is. There's nothing about what would be the best outcome. Oh, that'll help me defeat Nurgle. No, just is. And strangely enough, healing is also a potential component of change anyway. So, maybe he is. And also, it's not only because they become sick. That is one route through, and it's the cause effect of becoming sick and the emotional reaction that people have towards it that makes you more likely to fall to Nurgle rather than necessarily just being sick. Go wild.
So, yeah, personality traits and alignment with the Chaos Gods. There are so many ways that you could become aligned with Nurgle. Imagine if you were a doctor and you were in one of those countries stricken by plague, and you're like, I would do anything to ease their suffering. And along comes a friendly face who says, there is a way. There's a way that they would never suffer from disease ever again. And you'd be like, oh, really? What is that way? Well, he says, have you tried giving them more disease? For example, that's just one possible way. There are so many ways that you could become aligned with Khorne. It could be something as simple and as easy as Bruce Wayne's parents getting gunned down in Crime Alley and him desiring revenge. I must avenge my parents' death. I must become an avenger, a dark knight. And Khorne would be like, yes, absolutely. Beat up all the homeless people you can find. There's a lot of different ways it could happen to anybody in any. I mean, as creators, Andy and I, we could easily become Tzeentch corrupted just by offering, hey, how would you like to change the way that you approach or the way you perceive reality? Oh my God, what a great boon that would be, right? It's entirely possible that anyone could fall in any way, and it's just like, how could you become addicted to heroin? Well, I was at a low point in my life, and someone offered it to me as a way to escape. That can happen too. Yeah. Again, I am not a user of heroin, and I'm not endorsing using of heroin.
I mean, are you sure?
No, listen, you can see I've been no trap. But I'm just talking about it as a metaphor. Anyway, that's what I have to say about it.
Despair. Nurgle feeds off that shit. The droning legions of his hosts as they count disease to disease. Despair. That's a really good place to start.
Well, Nurgle's also, but joy is also part of serving Nurgle.
Yeah.
Joy.
The freedom that comes from it. Yeah, totally. And they are core directions that you could move in. Because, freed of that disease. Love it. Right, so where are we next? Jack, that was Jack, wasn't it? It's Gigawins, and we're almost coming up to time, so we are going to speed up just slightly. About the Kroot army answer, there was a dedicated Kroot army list in Published White Dwarf at one stage. Don't remember what edition it was for. They had winged Kroot jump troops and such. It was awesome.
Fourth edition. I do remember
that was fourth, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Slushy Raccoon, do you think the Materium corrupts the warp in ways imperceptible to us mortals?
Certainly.
Yeah. And if you go with even the very original descriptions of the Immaterium, the warp, it was constructed of all of the emotions, the hopes, the dreams, the fears of all of the people from the material realm. Indeed, sentience was the problem, and in many respects, the root cause of the Chaos Gods. And as you move through the later editions, they kind of run with that, and they don't really contradict it with any deep design. It's largely the whirls and eddies and currents that you find in the Immaterium are caused by the people, the sentient minds of the Materium. So one is literally corrupting the other, which in turn corrupts back.
The warp is a dark mirror. It is a reflection of our own reality that is influenced by our thoughts, our dreams, our emotions, our wishes.
100%. Seen through a mirror darkly. Love it. Hey, David Whitfield, given the Emperor denied all religion and the divine, your theories on where the Sisters Living Angels' powers actually come from?
So here's the thing. The Emperor absolutely knew that gods existed. He knew it. Without a shadow of a doubt, he knew that gods existed. But he set up the Imperial Creed. Let me rephrase that. He set up the Imperial Truth, was what they called it during the Great Crusade. Set up the Imperial Truth to reject that for his own reasons. He was doing that for his own reasons. So yeah, he denied all religion. That is true, but he did it knowing that it was a falsehood. So where do the powers from the sisters? I presume you're talking about the sisters' battle and the living. When you say living angel, I presume you mean Celestine, the living saint. Where do their powers actually come from? They come from. We're not sure exactly, but it seems to be that the Emperor, it has been described that the Emperor is not unlike a chaos god himself. He has a vast well of psychic power, supernatural abilities that are granted from him to those that he chooses to give that power to. So with that, there is no authoritative word of God like this is what it is. But it is strongly, heavily implied that the Emperor is granting them these powers, that they are gaining a power from worshiping him, not unlike how a chaos worshiper might gain power from one of the chaos gods.
The Emperor's real. The Astronomican's literally out there. Now, regardless of what it's become in the warp, and I think it is probably a better description than he, regardless of what it has become, it's a very real entity. So take that first. Could it grant? Yes, it could. It could do it as a mortal entity rather than an immortal warp-facing entity, which it also kind of is. So it could do it from both sides if you wish to perceive it in that way. But further, you also have the slightly more controversial route, which is they're psychers with faith, and they're just reflecting their faith in different ways, because magic is powerful shit. And we might not want to call it magic because, hey, I'm the Warhammer guy and I like to call everything magic. But it could be that also. So it could be entirely self-imposed, and their belief is somewhat misplaced in that regard. You can come up with your own answers. And all of those answers could canonically be correct for different individuals. So it doesn't need to be they are all this. One could be one thing, another could be another thing.
Well, I think it's incontrovertible that their power comes from the Emperor. Like, that's the one thing I would say we know for sure. It does come from the Emperor.
They believe.
As far as we know, because it's all through the lens of the Imperium.
Yeah, totally. And they're a reliable source and definitely not fascist. So, Lord Inquisitor, is there an Empire character in fantasy that uses Chaos Forbidden lore stuff like Eisenhorn and 40k, shunned and hunted, but arguably no Chaos follower? Yeah! I mean, this is a relatively common theme in some of the Infernal stories and the comics from Warhammer Monthly and similar, where they would take the concept that you're describing and run with it a little bit. The idea of the witch hunter that uses the powers that it is attempting to bring to an end to do that. Use chaos versus chaos. But is there a big character that uses it? Not off the top of my head, and that's bugging me because I'm almost certain someone will say, "What about this one?"
Yeah, I think there is a minor character somewhere. I think he might be right.
And it's really bugging me because one is not jumping out. One of the big differences between 40k and Warhammer is possession in Warhammer is short-lived and fatal. Where in 40k, long-term possession is not uncommon. I mean, it's not common. It's not like every other guy's possessed, but possession is not fatal in the same way that it is typically in Warhammer. If you get possessed by a minor demon in Warhammer, you're probably dead within a few days. That's not something that you could hold in a body and interrogate or something similar. So the options are a bit different there. You don't have the same opportunity to use chaos in that fashion. So it's ultimately more about using artifacts or possibly a forbidden magic like demonology. That is a potential route, but again, no characters jumping to mind. I feel like an idiot because I'm almost certainly missing something. But nothing's coming to mind on that one. Right, moving on swiftly to Mornington Crescent. Do you count Event Horizon as a precursor to 40K?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Andy said earlier in the show that the director even pointed that out. So yes.
Dead. Right, so moving on to still loading. I'm writing a tale about a doctor dealing with a lot of grief who has a spirit try to corrupt them. Any advice for sowing dread and mystery early on? Thank you.
I could say this.
Given the time still loading, we'll have to be quick on this one. So I'm going to interrupt and say very fast.
Fair enough.
So
I have thoughts, but keep in mind that your reader is always going to imagine something way darker and scarier than anything you can describe. So just try to be vague at first. Try to expose it very slowly, and try to expose it in a way that brings out the imagination. And like they see a shadow, they don't actually see the actual thing.
Yeah, that's perfect. And because of the time, I am going to move on swiftly and say, Mike Halsey, when referring to every Warhammer IP, should it be called a mythos? Is there a phrase when referring to every setting at once? The Warhammer mythos. I mean, you could.
Multiverse? I don't know.
Yeah. It hasn't really got a name yet that I'm aware of. It's just it's just Games Workshop's games and their IP. Right, and that brings us to a beautiful end. We have sort of discussed the Realm of Chaos and Truth. We've just had a giant Q&A where we have themed it around the Realm of Chaos, and I'm actually really pleased with how that landed as an idea, largely because we got to have a good deep dive into everything that Ross thinks concerning Chaos, 40K, Realms of Chaos, Warhammer, how it all piles together, and I, for one, had an absolute ball. Thanks, Ross. You rock.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a wonderful time, and I really enjoyed all the great questions everybody brought up.
Yeah, the questions are pretty damn awesome. So, yeah, thanks, everyone. That's been an absolute joy. I am going to say good night to you all, because it's now past 1 a.m. over at my side.
Oh my God.
That was, yeah. Well, I'm used to this on a Wednesday. It sometimes goes to silly times on a Wednesday. I'm going to say thanks all. I am going to head off and take some more painkillers because my dental woes have not come to an end. I have a big gap sitting right here and it's just a touch sore. So thank you all. And indeed, thanks for saying thanks as you bring up all your thanks. It's been an absolute joy. We will see you all next time for another fine episode of Lorebeards. We will be gathering this Sunday for the second part of Marathi. The room for that should be up tomorrow. We'll be discussing that. And of course, LAWhammer will be back this Friday, where we are heading into episode 69. Dudes, it's going to be a lot.
Nice.
Until then, we will see you all later. Bye.
Cheers.